say, to
Yeah,
correct?
to correct 3A section from the minutes of December 17th.
Any other questions?
And Stefan made the second, are you good with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that, that's fine. Okay, as this is a phone, meeting, Sue's on the phone, we need to do voice vote to accept the minutes. So, all those.
Susan Hammond, aye.
Ben, aye.
Donald, aye.
Peter Golak, aye.
Stefan, aye.
Okay, public comment on items not on the agenda, 3 minutes per person. Who's just that, I assume
Yeah,
you're not on the agenda for action, so you have the floor.
I'm here to try and lease the property that the town owns in Rockingham by the Meeting House for a 3-year term.
Okay, that was discussed at our last meeting, and we decided to change it from a 3 to a 1-year term and renew it.
Well, that was brought up, I guess, as far as the 1 year goes.
Yeah, well, we were waiting to hear back from you basically to see what your concerns were with the 1 year.
My concern is that it's going to take more than 1 year for me to recoup the money that I'm going to put into that field as far as lines and stuff like that. So I figure I need a 3-year term to offset what I'm paying for a lease and whatever else. And it's always been a 3-year lease when Lincoln developed at it, and I had it for the last 3 years. Lincoln is passed, so
Yeah, I know,
it's
yeah,
all gone on to me now, so,
yeah.
I would like it.
Yeah, I don't have
Maybe
a copy of
3
that
years,
lease
so.
with me tonight. Do you know if that was the amount of money was per year or was it a 3-year period?
No, the amount of money was per year, but the term was for 3 years.
Originally, yeah, we had
So
talked.
I don't-
It was
I don't think
$300 a year per year for 3 years, so it's $900.
Yeah, okay, I just want to make sure we're all clear on
Yeah,
that. So-
right.
For 3 years, $900 for 3 years.
Right,
Right.
$300 a year. that's
We agreed, the new motion discussion was $300 1 year.
Correct, and to go back to Mr. Sinet and talk to him about it. And there was another issue too, that was to restrict it to hay only.
Right, exactly. I don't have,
No, there's a question, there's spreading, contaminants on the field to do the corn, such as, weed control and stuff like that. There's someplace that came up with some problem with the corn, or the material after the corn had been taken out.
Right, I don't,
The
I
ground,
don't plant corn anyway.
they tried to
so-
reuse the ground, and because of the chemicals
Right.
that were there, they couldn't use it, so we just wanted to make sure that that was in there to
Okay.
clarify that. Okay, it's
So
not
you
on the agenda for action, so we really can't take any action on it tonight, and we can probably take it up at the next meeting, the 21st, and make the motion and go from there if the board's willing to go along with the 3-year term.
Well, maybe we could get both parties here to have the discussion, because it was,
Both parties.
well, we were getting some suggestions from, about cemeteries filling up, we might need it. Was the whole purpose of not signing a 3-year term.
Malcolm was okay with the 3 years.
Oh.
He's the one who brought up the corn, so he would be fine, I believe. But we can send it back to Malcolm. We can bring it back to you with a 3-year term and make sure
I would
Malcolm.
like to sign it for 3 years, and if you figure in 2 years that it's not gonna work because you want to put, in the cemetery or whatever. So anyways, you
I'm
let
just
me know.
going off of what I remembered them talking about, but if he's okay with it, then I think we'll just bring it to the next meeting and we can take action on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you might just make
You can
a
let me know. and-
Yeah.
cursory motion for us.
Alright.
Yes, definitely. It was already on my list for next meeting.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments? Manager report.
Okay. The VCRD, Vermont Community and Rural Development, the second community meeting, the step 2, is tomorrow in the Town Hall Theater at 6:30. So,
I heard that come in.
yeah. Glad we found a place and glad it's in the building where it was advertised. So everybody needs to show up. There will be refreshments, including sales by our concessions. Just for the board, information on the constable is in your packet, just FYI, there's no action on that tonight, but just some information. I just want to let you know the Howard Block parking lot, I don't know if any of you have been behind there, but we did do the improvements that we talked about, so that snow removal would be possible and fire truck access would be possible also. And, it's working well. And then just heads up, the nuisance ordinance will be effective January 18th. So, that's a good thing.
Is that listed? Oh, sorry.
What do you mean?
Is that listed on the website for folks who haven't taken a look at
The
it?
nuisance ordinance? Should be, yeah. Rebecca's not here, but
Well,
yes.
I don't know, I'm asking you. I mean,
Yes, it has been, and it should still be. We need to, put the, flow chart up there, so they can see how it works, and you need to, appoint safety officers, which will be at the next meeting. I'll tell you about that when we talk about the next meeting.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the budget review. Do we want to do that now, or do we want to do the other articles and come back to the budget at the end? Sue, you have any comment on that?
No, I mean, it sounds like the town meeting article should happen after we do the budget review, at least that.
Because on there, we have the development office and the access permit and a couple of appointments,
Yeah,
and then we get those
I mean, those I
off.
think we could probably get out of the way, but did we have to do that before,
Yeah, we would have had to done
make
that
the
before.
changes?
Right. So, all right, we'll go into the budget review then.
Okay.
And
So
we
we'll
did-
just give you a little quick overview.
Yeah,
About
and
one
you
of
got a new sheet, everybody got the new sheet that came out, and you emailed it to us.
I
Yeah,
didn't-
two months
I
today.
didn't print it.
I didn't print it off.
Let's do these first.
Do you,
Do you want to print a copy?
the new budget sheets, did
Do
you
you
guys?
have one? No, I use this one.
Yeah, the only difference.
I have notes on my other one, but this one's not right.
Well, it's just one number
I
that's
printed
not
it
right.
out, but she would do that.
Okay.
Let me just do it.
Yeah. I mean, I can just tell that, oh, is it downstairs?
I'm all set.
Yeah, Shannon, let's just, it's just the number, instead of 2.08, it's 2.84. That's the only change.
No, you can't do a week forward.
Can you fix these up, please?
It's on the back sheet. that's all going.
Yeah.
No, we're sitting right in front of them.
Okay, you have the floor.
Yep, thank you. We wanted to first go over the total revenue and the total, operating budget expenses, just to give you a general idea.
So they're putting on the screen, unfortunately, we can't see it from where you're at.
Okay. Is Fact TV there?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I should be able to see it on that,
Yep.
if they're aimed at it.
About an 11-hour time difference, so.
Currently, he's not aimed at, but he will be, I guess, when we get into
And
this.
soon, what we'll be able to do is actually go directly from the computer to the camera without going through this. So it'll be a much clearer picture. Obvious source. Well, how about I tell you what the components are
Technical glitch here,
in the
so
meantime?
not coming up.
I'll provide an overview of what we've done, and then we'll get that. Just a reminder, the 2019 grand list value was $4,668,910. And I'm just mentioning that because it was a 2% increase over 2018, which was a nice thing to happen, but we're not expecting that to happen again. A small increase will probably happen, but not the $9 million that we had last year. So the current budget is based on no increase to the grand list. The 2019 town tax rate, so the current in the budget that we're in now, was 1.0778. And town taxes were 31% of the total tax bill. So when you get your tax bill, most of that is education, which is typical. 31% is the tax bill, and that's for Bellows Falls residential. there's actually 6 categories, so rather than tell you all 6, we just picked Dulles Falls residential because that's the largest category. So the 2020 town tax rate proposed for all funds is, get this is the sheet you should be looking at, this one, with the 2 greens, is 1.1062, which is an increase of 0.0284, which is 2.84 cents. That translates to about, for a home valued at $150,000, that is an increase of about $42 a year, or between $3 and $4 a month. So as you'll recall, we were at a much higher rate when we started. So some of the things we did to bring the rate down were 2 increases on recycling and garbage fees. First, the C&D fee was increased from 10 cents to 15 cents per pound. Garbage fee increased by 25 cents a bag. Peter Golick obviously is very involved at the recycling center. And there may be some additional increases that will be proposed because you have the flexibility to do that really anytime. But this budget is based on those increases happening at least by July 1st, to be effective July 1st. Refinancing the fire truck debt, that decreased expenditures by $100,000. That was a huge component. Don't look at the greens. So we saved 2.14 cents on that, and we'll talk more about debt and long-term financing at the next meeting. This meeting is focused on things that affect next year's tax rate. So the first year, obviously, of debt affects next year's tax rate, but the concept of smoothing it out and making the high highs and low lows go away, that will be discussed at the next meeting. Land use revenue, that's one of the categories of revenues. Just based on actuals, we increased that $15,500. We removed the town hall reserve fund increase to a separate article. That decreased expenditures $20,000. We moved the fire equipment, this is the Rockingham fire equipment, to an article. That decreased expenditures $12,500 for 0.27 cents. And meeting house improvements, to also an article, which decreased expenditures $22,000. So, this is the proposed town revenue estimates. And you can see this is just general fund.
Are you all done with that sheet, or are we going to your computer?
I was going to, but actually, this is a good segue because this doesn't, oh no, it doesn't include all the funds. I'd rather go to this if that's okay, because it's a general overview, and I can go through it pretty quickly, and then we can go to the highway.
Does everybody have one of those? I don't know.
We
No,
didn't print
this
them
is-
for you because they're going to change depending on the decisions you make. This is just based on
Okay.
And we'll get you, this is just a general, update on where we are. And it shows you property taxes are 75% of
Right,
the revenue.
and that's without those 3 articles being moved though.
No, this is with those
Well,
articles.
those articles. I
this
thought you
is
said
with
they
the
weren't.
revised budget you have in front of you. You have all these numbers. They're just in a,
We just
they're
made
in the
these
budget.
today so that you could just get another view of what's happening. You're not approving this or anything, it's just another way to
No, I
look
know.
at it. Like for example, you can see the revenue source recycling solid waste goes up 22%. That shows you the impact of those fee increases. Property taxes up 1.9%, so that's just under 2%. So property taxes is usually what you look at. These are the pie charts that we did for the town report last year. We're just trying to do things earlier. So the takeaways on this are recycling solid waste going up 22%, property taxes going up 1.9%, miscellaneous is going up 11%. That's worthy of note. So let's go to expenses. So then this is the operating budget. So you can see general fund and highway fund are an equal percentage of the budget at 40%. Debt service we've talked about how the reason, one of the big reasons the property tax is relatively high here compared to other towns is the debt service. It's 16%, we had 17%, next year it changed slightly. But that should really be at 8 or so percent. It should be below 10%. So that's something that is important to talk about, and that's what we're going to talk about next meeting, is debt service. And then cemetery 1% and equipment fund 3%. So those are relatively steady. So that's all we need to do with those. So now we'll go back. You have this sheet. So at the bottom of the sheet, the front page is general fund and the back page is highway fund. If you did want to further reduce the tax rate for the general fund, you could do a transfer from the fund balance of 50, or whatever amount you want, but 50,000 saves a little over 1 cent. We're not recommending that because we think we need to get out of the transfers. We did 2 years ago. We did 100,000. This year we're doing 50,000. We think we ought not to do that.
But you're also considering the High Hill project that's taking 120,000 out of there too, so.
Yeah, I think that would be out of the highway fund balance. Right. Oh, there are some uses of fund balance that we're talking about.
You just said we like to not do that.
Right, we don't want to do 100, or this $50,000. The ones that we're proposing are less, or much less. The fire equipment is, I think that's the only one. I think the meeting house improvements come from a reserve fund. Where's the meeting house from?
We're proposing to move everything out of the meeting house so that we can use it.
Right. So
And
that's
also
not from
add
fund.
to it.
Yeah, so fund balance, we can show you that, but we're not recommending 50,000. But you're free to do it. I mean, we wanted to give you options. So, go to highway fund, and these are just overall, this is the high level picture, and then we can go to the line items. So highway fund, so the proposed tax rate, 0.5890, and then included in this proposed budget are 2 deductions, each of $50,000. One is to reduce paving next year, and the other is to reduce contract sidewalk services. So both of those together save 2.14 cents. Additional options, one is to postpone equipment purchases, decrease expenses 65,000. I think we talked about that at a previous meeting. That would save 1.39 cents. We're not recommending that because then we get off schedule and impact future equipment. And then we're not recommending any positions to be eliminated. That hasn't really been discussed here, but I know it's been discussed elsewhere.
The refinancing of the fire truck, on the motion or the article passed last year for a 5-year bond. And we're looking at refinancing it and doing a 5-year payment and a balloon payment in the sixth year, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Yes, it was a second 5 years.
Are we legal to do that? Because
So that's not quite accurate. It's altogether gonna be a 5-year loan with a balloon payment in the 5th year. It was just refinancing so that we didn't have even payments every year for 5 years. We consulted with the attorney, we consulted with the bank and with VLCT.
which attorney do we consult with?
Art, we talked to Tom. And then one suggested the other, and then the other suggested the other, so we consulted with all of them, and the financing agreement itself allows for refinancing.
Okay, because the thing is, if we intend to do that, I don't want to get to the town meeting and find out, like we did a couple of years ago when we financed 2 fire trucks, to try to get them for 5 years or 10 years, and we found out can't do that. So I want to make sure that if we're going to do 5 years, that we can do it that way. And I know that came from, I think it was Gillis or something, and who was an attorney in the state office that said we found that out at the last minute. And I don't think we want to go through that again. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're perfectly clear on that.
Yeah, the
Before
next
we
select board meeting, I'm bringing refinance paperwork to you.
I mean, dealing with the bank is one thing, but I just wanna make sure
I
we're
can
not
bring
running into
you
a
the
problem.
letters from
If somebody
VLCT
comes up
and the
and says,
attorney, or
because
whatever.
you're doing that, you gotta have a bond, now you got a bond for,
It's not a bond, we
Okay,
didn't
bond, just-
vote to bond.
alright,
The-
No, thank you for letting us know that.
just trying to make sure we got our ducks
Yeah.
in a row, because I don't wanna, you know, and then
Right,
we're gonna have to reboot, so. Okay. Go ahead. Anybody have any questions so far?
So far, or where are we at here?
Well,
I have a lot of questions.
what she's, well, we can get
yeah,
into
so
that.
that's the
individually,
overview,
but I don't
so
know if you had any questions on the overview.
now would be a good time to go through.
On her menu drop-down
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, we kind of breezed through it. I think we should spend a little more time on it. Perhaps discuss the items, rather than just read them. And I'd like to go back to this sheet here, tax rate setting sheet,
Mhm.
where if you look, 2008, the grand list, I'll make this quick. 2018, the grand list, $82,000 difference, roughly, in my head math. Go over to the, what's essentially spending, 2008, 2018, $2 million difference. Which I've said since I've been on this board that the taxes here have doubled in the last 10 years. And if your essentially revenue went up $82,000, but we're spending an additional $2 million, I think that's where we need to look at, is our spending. And if someone can explain that differently to me, then I'm all ears. We're 2008 had the same property value, you're spending $3 million. 2018, same property value, you're spending $5 million. So it goes up and up and up. And when you said earlier in your statement that it's only a $154,000 home only pays $54 more a year. So added up to how many years it's been going up and up and up and up for these people. So I think we really need to look at our spending. And I also feel like moving spending to an article isn't reducing our tax rate. Still paying, the people are still paying for it. So unless we're reducing it somewhere else, we're not doing anything to the tax rate.
Jumping into the second one first?
Sure. Either one.
Totally agree. It depends on where the funding comes from. Like with the fire trucks, the board last year felt that it would be better to have the town meeting reps or the town meeting people vote themselves.
That was a large
On whether-
item which we planned for.
No, I understand,
This,
but,
you're just trying to shift
no, but,
$32,000 out of your budget
No.
to make it look like it's less.
but what I'm saying is, or what I'm trying to say is, the fire truck is an example of an article that actually does increase the taxes, because we got hit this year. That's how we had that 9-cent increase when we started out. The big part of that was the fire trucks. And so that, when you take it, when you adopt something like that, and it hasn't increased tax, then you're just kicking it down the road. Most of these, and we can get particular on these, the meeting house one and the town hall reserve, those are using money that has already been set aside. So it's money that exists for that reason, that people paid taxes on years ago, and it's just sitting there not being used. So it doesn't make sense to tax people further when the money's there to be used for that purpose. So that's why those are different. So it really depends on the source of the reserve,
Right.
or of the article, I'm sorry, whether the source is reserves or new taxes.
But 2.5 cents of that was the fire trucks, of the 9 cents that you're speaking of.
Yes.
Just 2.5 cents. So,
Well, was it two or was it?
I thought it was 2.5, that's my math is
Well,
wrong.
it's 130, well, it would have been 136,000 a
Would've,
year.
yeah.
which was roughly about 2.5 cents. But I think the town is on the right track, because if these go to article and get voted, then they're defeating the purpose of eliminating the 20, 30, 12, 50,
You're
$4,000.
Shifting lines, you're moving it somewhere else, which is, do you have any comment to this, my first statement?
I would love it if we could go back and find out what
Well, we
happened
can't.
from.
We
Well,
can't.
actually,
Well, what
we
we can
can,
do
it
is
just
right
takes a
now.
lot of time.
What we can do is right now, that's why we're here right now.
No,
So someone whose value of their home hasn't increased, how can we keep asking them to pay more and more and more and more and more?
we're trying our best to hold the costs down. Things cost more. I mean, people cost more, salt costs more, but we have made reductions in a lot of areas, and we're always looking for efficiencies, and we're not, this isn't, something that we just threw at you. I mean, we're doing our best to make
Not
this.
to defend the position any way, mean, or manner, but just to sort of explain some things that you've got. The town hall renovation bond that was in there, said, as Wendy said earlier, that it's the debt service that does have a big effect. And the town hall renovation bond that took place for the theater, and that's not gonna get done until 2025. The library bond was 2032. It's not gonna expire till 2032. That's 10 cents right there out of your tax money. You have to understand that you're not gonna get any tax relief at least until 2025.
So in the
When that
meantime,
bond gets
do you
done.
feel
No,
it would be our best interest to level fund, perhaps reduce our spending?
Well, I'm getting to that, because the same thing holds true on the school board side, which really doesn't affect our town taxes, but they have Central Saxon River bond that does not expire until 2025. That's another 4 cents on your tax bill that does affect what you're paying. And the middle school is ironically, both expire at the same time, 2032 and 2025. So you're gonna have that debt out there, 12 cents for both the library and the school, middle school project. 12 cents is gonna be on your tax bill.
We don't
until
have-
2032.
We don't have control over those things. We sit
Well, you
on,
do when you vote.
we sit on this board. You
I
do
know.
when you vote.
I'm just bringing that up for that, and of course, we've done some other things that, you know, the rec building, we have to repair that, the tank out in the dooryard, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, plus we started an equipment replacement process, that costs you money. I'm not defending the process, I'm just trying to explain it so people understand how we got into our predicament here. So I do agree that we need to cut our spending, but, you know. it'd be nice if we
Peter,
could-
can I just interject here that it's also, the town taxpayers vote on these budgets as well.
Mhm.
So they voted on those bonds, they voted on that debt.
Exactly, that's why.
And we're dealing with it, and so the question is to reduce taxes, do we want to reduce services?
You don't need
And do the
to.
taxpayers want us to reduce
You
services?
don't need to
And in the
reduce service.
past town meetings, that hasn't been the case. They voted for these increases.
50 people.
Well, they're the voters
You
who show up.
don't need to reduce services. In any way.
Okay. So, do we want to continue on to the spreadsheets?
Sure, and just a general comment that the other way to reduce taxes, which is what happened last year, was to increase the grand list, to increase the value of the grand list, which we have a lot of opportunity for that here. I mean, it went up $9 million last year, which was huge. Okay, so we're going to the,
Well, if you actually, I don't know where you get your $9 million from, but if you look at the numbers we got on here, if you start off with $4,500,000, you end up in 2020 at $4,668,000, that's only $168,500 increase in the grand list. I know that it's a taxable grand list.
yeah, so there's decimals, but of that, 9 million, Chroma was 3 million of it, so then paid 30,000 in taxes. which is 30,000 that other people didn't have to pay.
Spreadsheet. Anybody have any questions or notes? Because I do.
Okay, so what we did here,
What?
chime in if you want to, the
I'm
colors.
not, are we done with this?
If you want to
Did
continue.
anyone else have any questions with that?
Well, all of that is in the
'Cause it's-
spreadsheet.
Right, I understand, but it's simplified here. We have many different options with the recommended savings or potential savings. So where does it stop to get your 2.84?
Right at the, before option to further reduce the tax rate. And all of the, where it says included in January 3rd proposed budget, and then it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things. Those are all things, except for the land use revenue increase. Those are all things that we discussed and you guys approved.
You have any other questions? On that sheet?
Not on that sheet at this time, no.
Sue, any questions on the options menu sheet?
No, I'm all set right now, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, let's go to the spreadsheet.
Okay, so the first page on the spreadsheet is revenue, general fund revenue. And that light yellow shaded place where there's nothing, that's the elevator revenue that is supposed to come, but it hasn't yet, and we just,
We're working with Robin to be able
60,000.
to get it. It's our money. She's been submitting for reimbursement. So we still have that projected to come. It just wasn't, it was budgeted. It hit expenses last year. And it will hit revenue this year.
and then the blue one, a little farther down, that's that land use item that has, you have not seen that increase before, the 150,000, but you can see, if you look at the actuals, current year is 149,000, so it's not much of an increase to go to 150, which is just rounding. And then the north storefront, that revenue item, we think it is, obviously it's gonna be less since we've had vacancies in the north storefront.
We anticipate it to be 3,500 instead of the budgeted 74.
On to the next page? Or,
Do they just ask questions?
I don't know, do you wanna ask questions, or do you want me to?
Any leads on your storefront down there?
Yeah,
There's two potential tenants. One who used to run a store in town, and one that would be someone expanding from elsewhere.
and we
So
put out an
hopefully-
RFP.
Yeah, there's an
response
RFP response
Is
is
the rent
due
going
January
down?
24th.
Why have we budgeted less, anticipating next year rent's gonna go down?
No, the rent would be higher than it was in the past.
I was just being
Okay.
conservative in case something didn't transpire by July 1st, and it would just give us a buffer because it was revenue.
Okay, so the next page, the blue stuff is the recycling, which you've seen before.
Okay, let's look at, under recycling soda cans. We're only estimating $4,500 for income, but if you look back through the years, it's been pretty close to $6,000. I know it's not a big chunk
Yeah.
of money, but
We had a reason for that, too.
Oh, that's right. We did have a reason for that.
so,
We can look at that
Gary,
again.
Yeah,
Gary Gary thought it was going down.
Yeah.
It was, I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what, but Gary thought it was going
In
down.
talking with Gary down the recycle, I believe that we used to take them to Brattleboro, and we got, if they were a nickel, we got a nickel, we got what they were returnable for, the price, and I know some of the alcohol liquor bottles were 15 cents, so that's why those gentlemen are fishing bottles out of the container. But I understand now that they don't take them to Brattleboro, we had to go to Springfield, and I think there was a price drop down to 3 cents or something like that.
You know what else? One of our volunteers used to take them
Right.
and bring us back the money, and he can no longer do it, so now the person who's returning them is taking a percentage of it.
Right.
So, that's assuming, but you're right, I think it's the 3 to 5 cent difference. They get 2 cents, we get 3 cents.
Yeah.
So, that's our assumption
Right.
there.
And there are, other than the few cents of increases on recyclable, I mentioned on the menu sheet, there's some other ones we've been discussing. I've got to talk to Gary about it first, but there's white goods, all the refrigerators and things down there, maybe going on a couple of bucks, couches, things like that. Where for the lowest man on totem pole, every place else gets 30 bucks for a washer or something like that to leave down there. We're only getting 15, so I don't think $2 is gonna hurt
We
anybody.
get 8, right?
Anyway, okay, that's all I got on that page, unless someone else has anything.
All right, does anybody have anything on page 3? Theater income, licenses and permits. Transfer, here's the transfers at the bottom, transfer from meeting house reserve, transfer from unsafe building reserve. So those do not increase the tax rate because they come from funding that's already in the bank, actually. So then, okay to go to page 4? So then we just adjusted the salary here, the assistant actual salary, so there was a decrease.
Going down to finance office training, we're budgeting $1,000 in the past year, the highest it's ever gotten was 500. Is there somebody gonna go to school again this year?
Somebody do.
We're not going to school, but I've been going to a lot of
Yeah, well,
trainings
there's
and
nothing,
classes.
that's why I say we're going to, it's 2019, the actual was 500, I know.
But I was only here
Yeah.
for half of it.
Yeah, I know, that's why I'm just wondering, so. Same with reconciling items, I know that could be anywhere at this point, but,
So those are little items in the audit that instead of digging through to find $10 mistake here or there, that's the bucket they put them in. I can get rid of
I
it.
was just thinking that maybe we cut that down to 500 instead of 1,000. I know we're nitpicking, but every little bit helps there, I guess.
Yeah, so you're not suggesting cutting the training though, right?
Well, no, not if she's
Yeah, I mean, like,
not aware of that.
tax sales, they just went to tax sale, 2 of them, which is really good
Yeah.
training.
We'll get to that one too, I got a note on that one.
Okay.
So we ready to go to page 5? Anything you wanna mention here, Wendy, or?
No, so this is Lister's, town clerk's office. We didn't make any changes since the last time you saw it. And our office operations.
I know there's a request in here for town clerk's office for, salary increases. Just a wild thought here, probably merit versus a straight 2%. But then again, you get to who decides on the merit. It's kind of a tough choice, you know, rather than going to the 5%. Especially if we're gonna do 2% on everybody else, it's kind
I
of.
only have 2% in the budget. Kathleen had asked for 5%.
Right,
for
I
both
know,
of them,
that's,
But
but
we
you
have,
only have 2 in here now?
I only have 2%.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to, the rest of it could be merit, I guess, if we wanna play with that. That's just an option, something to think about.
Yeah, the board could,
There's no merit in
Raise
here
that.
for anybody.
No, I know, but I mean, say that's, in lieu of the 2% flat across the board, I was just thinking out loud. Okay. Let's get on to office operations, town hall. We've got $10,600 listed for server, hardware, software. What's going on there?
So we
Replacing something?
we reallocated the Dominion Tech into buckets so that they match their invoices in our contract. So the overall amount for office operations has gone, down
Yeah, I know.
year over year, but I just reallocated it so our accounts would match invoices.
So the
that it-
same with the IT security is the same thing? Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Just there, that's all.
and this will be the second year of that contract.
I think we need to investigate. It's a little high for my liking, but that's okay.
Sign the contract.
Subject for discussion. Office.
We're in a contract.
Pardon?
We're in a contract
I know, yeah. But we can think about it going forward.
for what's a
I think at
lengthy
the end of
contract.
the term, it's a 3-year, I think at the end of the term, it would make sense, because there were costs that they gave, in exchange for getting the contract.
Office equipment and service, we have 5,000. I don't think I was going back, it's never gone over 4. Maybe it dropped to 4,000 there instead of 5. That's the last line on the page.
Yeah, we could probably, but as long as that's not IT stuff, right?
Anybody else on page 5? Page 6? Planning studies, I believe. We budgeted 3,500, 2019, we only spent 733, is there something going on there that we
I'm
don't
sorry,
know?
Planning stuff.
Planning stage, studies, page 5, 6 rather, excuse me. We anticipate spending 3,500 this year. Chuck?
May I? Okay.
Isn't that, Peter, isn't that something we get a grant from Wyndham Regional for, so it's a
I don't
wash?
know, that's what I'm asking Chuck, but it's only $733, so I don't think it's a grant.
Yeah, excuse me.
Well, I don't know if we got the grant then, because, well, I don't know, actually,
Okay, well.
because this is part of the, is this part of our rewriting of our regional plan, or is this something different?
Chuck?
Thank you. I didn't want to just jump in the conversation without being asked. So the $3,500 is updated the town plan, any special studies that we need. If we do not have to spend it, we absolutely do not spend it. So when you see 733, that's an indicator that so far we have been able to defray all those costs. The planning commissioners are working a little bit more than they'd like to work, but otherwise they work for free. And we don't need to dip into that money yet. We did receive a grant from the state, that matching funds will come from that. That award was announced last month for establishing a common adjacent to the square, so that is a catch-all item. But again, we, just like the law, the legal side of things, if we don't need to spend that money, we won't.
Okay, let's go back up to the internship. Is that a absolute necessity? I know we discussed it the last meeting about if it's a student coming in to learn about the process, they can use it, the time to earn credits, if I'm not mistaken, versus paying them.
I can take this from my chair.
I don't know about that. I mean, that would depend entirely on what school they're going to and so forth. The planning commission discussed this at length during one of our meetings, and there was only one dissenting vote, one commission, that was Deborah White. The rest of us felt strongly that we wanted to have a paid intern. This year in particular, our schedule is to have drafts of each chapter of the new town plan ready for public outreach, ready to present to the public by midsummer. And we're going to follow procedures sort of like what you're seeing with these community visits. Have a large gathering, promote it, so forth and so on. Give everybody a copy of a couple chapters at a time, and really try and get public feedback. Maybe do another survey and so forth. We're all volunteers, and
I know we're not doing it. I do what everyone's inside.
yeah, I know. And we just last Saturday, we had a day-long meeting downstairs here. You know, most of us on the commission are working. I only work part-time, but most of the people work full-time. So we could really use some extra help with that, and we could really use someone that we can actually hire rather than just sort of begging someone to come in and volunteer. Who may or may not have any qualifications. We need someone who can do graphic design. We need someone who can help with the website updates and help with all kinds of preparations for these meetings. And we feel strongly, after a lot of discussion, if you want someone like that, you need to be able to offer them something. These college students, a lot of them come and expect to work in the summer for money, for books and tuition and whatever they have to, their college expenses. And it's important to offer them something. We're just talking about minimum wage, maybe an average out of 20 hours a week, I think it said, or something like that. So that's our feeling on that.
Commissioners, if I may.
Certainly.
Backed off of the proposal, what you're seeing is about 40% of what was originally suggested. So we backed off hours, we backed off pay, we just minimum wage, and that would be only the only expense. There are requirements, so just like the special studies, if we don't find a resident of Rockingham, an individual that we know can contribute to their community and so forth, then this will be, this position will remain vacant.
The only reason I ask is we have an assistant planner or whatever in the office out there. That's something that wouldn't work in that bailiwick.
This is a person that's going to be running around out in the field, hopefully doing what some of our commissioners have done so well. And the role of an administrator or secretarial service is often to be in the office and be somebody present. So I'm not saying that's impossible. It was just something we didn't think was a good use of resources.
Throwing that out for.
Agreed.
To get. Anybody else have any questions so far? I guess I'm on a roll and. All right, let's get on to, it's just, I'm not sure, maybe it's a faux pas on my part, but tax sale expense, you've got a savings of 50,000 shown, but you're anticipating spending 10 this year and nothing next year. Well, you got title searches to do. You're accounted for that? And pay somebody in there.
Yep.
What's houses?
Are they gonna be free? Or are you putting them under legal services?
No, we would be doing this year before July 1st.
So the $10,000 that you see in the FY20,
Okay,
that's for that.
all right.
And then can I just point something out about tax sale? First of all, every time we talk about it, people are reminded that they are being charged 1.5% a month, so 18% a year is what you're being charged if you have outstanding taxes, so pay your taxes. But in FY17, we spent 52,000 and recovered, because tax sale revenue.
Well, over a 3-year period, from the time the tax sale started till the end, we spent just over $120,000, and we recuperated $101,000 the last time we did a tax sale.
Yeah, so we're trying to, this is actually an area where we're trying to spend a lot less money and get the same amount of revenue. So this is an example of what you're looking for, is where we're making your tax dollars go farther. Your tax dollars who are funding this office.
Okay.
And And that's why it was important to get the, training done. And we think it's probably logical to do a tax sale every other year, that's what we're thinking now, but, that decision will be y'all's decision. The schedule of it, but one is coming up, so now's a good time to pay tax. And every time we talk about it, we get more revenue in, which is good.
Okay, any other questions on that page? Go to 7.
So it's,
You-
meeting house at the top and then recycling expenses.
On recycle, have we had any success getting another person?
Yeah, we have 4,
Only got 3 down there.
we have 4.
Well, you got 4 you came, but
Success
because
in
we're losing 1, or possibly losing 1,
volunteers.
yeah.
I
So we may be looking.
wasn't asked to recruit.
No, I know,
volunteers.
I'm just saying that, because if those 4 are being paid, then we only have, actually, you don't have Brad's in there, correct? There's no?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we need volunteers, tell the folks.
Definitely, we need volunteers. There'll be a press release coming out begging for people, but anyway.
What was the question?
The extra person down there, I thought we were still looking for another one.
You want a 5th paid person?
I don't know why, but, because Bob's been there anyway, he was low man on a pole, that's why we changed him. And Eric and Brad are the 2 that we hired. I thought they were looking for a 3rd one, I thought Gary, I don't know, I can.
Well, then we would need to increase this budget to 51,000.
Yeah, this is just based on the 4 people you can see in the description.
Okay.
So his new is Brad.
Going down the
And then that postage was reduced.
Going down the compact and maintenance line. We've been budgeting 5,000, 17 we spent 16, 21. Next year, 18 we spent 17, which I assume is gonna be for the roof that we put in there. I'm just guessing. I thought it was later than that, but maybe it was 18.
No, I think, wasn't that when we had to do all the electricity and everything to put it in? Is that when we put it in, was that fiscal year?
You put the second one in just before I got on board, so that would have been the summer of 18.
So that might be a part of it too. Okay.
Because we added one,
Yeah.
right?
Then you go down through it, hasn't gone over $5,000, so I don't know, maybe there's some savings there. Put it down to 5 instead of 7.
Well, we have 2 of them now to maintenance each
Yeah.
year.
And to be truthfully, I don't think I've seen anybody down there putting any grease on them.
So they might have more
Yeah.
maintenance costs, so that's not good.
I can tell you right now, because there was one day down there, we didn't think the thing was gonna move. The
Did
doors,
anybody do anything about it?
Why don't they do it?
I often bring my own grease gun
I'm
down.
not, I'm not. Seriously,
What's been done?
$30,000 piece of equipment.
Yeah, I know it.
Did
Yeah,
you let anybody know?
I just made it.
I don't know if Gary said anything, I'll let the man down, just a flunky down there.
Did
Come
the
garbage
pay
cans,
people
bottles.
down there do anything about it?
I don't control employees, so I can't answer that question. Okay, other than that, I noticed the expense, one of the reasons construction demo, has always been higher than what we're budgeting.
What are, I'm sorry.
2019 was 65,000, and we budgeted 50. We're budgeting 55 this year. I'll bet it's gonna be close to 65 or so, which is one reason why we're increasing the C&D rate.
Right.
just so everyone knows where that's coming from. Okay, let's go down to economic development. First one I'm gonna throw on the table was full-time director.
Yeah, do you want me
Get
to,
the board's
we think
thoughts
that's
on that.
really important, do you wanna put up that other chart?
Do we ever get the postage? I'm going to, a lot of these questions have been asked before, I'm going through my old notes here.
Right, we reduced it,
We
the
went over all
postage and
that,
the
yeah.
recycling expenses?
In the postage, in the recycling
Yeah.
expense,
Yeah.
nobody knew what it was for, postage, renewal advertising, we were mailing the,
Well, we had
The
increased
permit.
it,
The
so we
land-
were gonna see if we could mail them, but the rest of the expense in that line is, in previous years has been postage or advertising. We've had to advertise for positions for the last couple of years now, so we brought it back down to 500.
And it should also be the advertising that we do when we have different programs, like the hazardous
Mhm.
waste collection and that kind of
Right.
stuff. So we do wanna do some advertising, we don't wanna cut that to zero.
But we don't do any hazardous material down, so it's at another
I
facility.
know we don't do it there,
And
but,
they provide the sign.
but we wanna let people know about it, and there may be other ways we wanna let people know about it, so they don't dump it. So, yeah, so, this, oh, sorry.
Food compost, I know we're doing it now as a service, but it's costing us $2,000 a year roughly to get rid of it. I thought they were taking it for nothing until I started looking at that line. So,
well, the first year we knew how much it was gonna cost, but it was a new law, so nobody knew who was gonna
when
bring it
they
in.
changed the
We
effective
finished
date, so as of July of this coming year, 21, it's gonna become mandatory, so I wonder if we need to be, unless the state changes the mind again, legislative session's just starting, folks, so.
Well, that's
who
what we
knows?
had discussed, but I didn't get to
So I don't know
finish.
how, I'll have to talk to Gary about that, but I just thought that's a. So,
Can I finish?
sure. I'd like
So
to-
we talked, I didn't get to, we were gonna budget because it's not a law, and then we were gonna increase it. And it is a law, I don't think it needs to go through legislation, it goes into effect. So if we haven't anticipated increasing our compost expense, then we should. That's what we talked about last year, remember?
Yeah, no, but I'm saying is that the state, what I'm saying about legislative, the state changed the effective date from one year to the next, so next year, 2021. They were gonna do it last year, and then they decided to hold off a year because the composters were complaining it was costing whatever. So they were putting up a stink about it, so they put it off a year. Okay, getting back to,
I'm sorry.
you ready to move along here? Go ahead.
Just, are we thinking we need to increase that expense
The food
more than
compost.
2,000?
I don't think we need to increase the expense, I think we need to talk about revenue on that line item, I don't know how we do it.
Yeah, revenue, I think revenue would be complicated on that,
Yeah.
because you'd have to have somebody there, and we already have issues with volunteers and staff. So, I mean, the one option we can discuss not this year, but another year, is towns like Springfield charge their taxpayers for using this, service. We are only charging non-residents. I mean, I don't know if that's a discussion we want to have in a future year when we have a chance to look at recycling in total.
And you kind of factored in, I thought, that we weren't charging in-town residents because of the part of the budget and on their tax bills, the impression I was under.
Well, we, it
Well,
wouldn't
no, I
be-
know, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
putting it out there, other towns do charge, and if this is costing us, I'm not saying we do it, I'm just
Right.
saying for a future discussion.
Yeah.
Because it would reduce the taxes, if it's, anyway, it's just something to put out there, so that's why I think charging for individual things like food scraps isn't as much of an issue if people are paying for the services altogether. But anyway, that's a future discussion, not now.
Not a problem.
Yeah, can I just add something? Right now, the deficit is just $9,000 of recycling. Remember, it was much more previously.
Yep.
Oh, no, it's not, okay. So it's negative 9 plus 4, so 54, so it was 100.
Yeah, but that was when we were buying the equipment, so now that the equipment purchase hopefully will work.
Yeah, so that's what the taxpayers are paying,
But,
is the 52.
right, so we'll be,
52,000, yeah.
well, this increases will knock that down some more too, so, we may not cover it all, but we're gonna get closer.
Okay.
We're down to economic development, full-time person. Any comments from the board on that?
I will, but I think they want to go through that first. I have a comment, but you want to go through that
Yeah,
first?
I'd like to,
Yeah,
because,
right.
this, right now, the economic development directors have time. That does make, he does have enough time to do some of the grants that not only his time gets reimbursed for, but also finance director's time and some of my time too. You have this chart in your packet which shows, grants, and this isn't even all of the grants, this is just what was easier to talk about. Ongoing grants are current grants, and the VOREC one is just about to be applied for. I won't go into this in terrible detail, but what's important, I think what would be important to you in terms of evaluating the value of the position, there's a short-term value and then there's a long-term value. The short-term value in dollars to the town are these reimbursable amounts for administration.
Is that reimbursable provided you also do not secure the grant? Or is that only?
No, it's
secure-
only if you secure the grant. Right. But we also have grants that he basically administers,
Right.
the town needs to administer from 20 years ago, right? I mean, really old stuff. So
And is actually reimbursable monies for that?
a little bit, not much. But that's work that needs to be done by someone, no matter what.
Right.
So there's short-term value in terms of dollars that the town receives. There's also short-term value just to the people who get the services. I mean, he has folks who come here who are looking places to locate businesses, and he provides, so that's obviously value to them when he can help them find financing. He serves as the staff to the revolving loan fund board and to the VFADC, and interfaces with the BIFTA folks, and just does a heck of a lot for 30 hours. We want to make him full-time so that he can do even more, which would increase the amount of grants that he can go for. So these are the grants that we'd like to apply for. Many of them are, which I think is typical, you know, like the mill repairs and things that we've been talking about. But there's also, if you look down the projector, it's about a third of the way down, May 1st, 2020. It's a grant that we want to apply for the Opera House, for a 4K projector, which would bring it to another level. There's possibly things we can do with the old projector. He's available to help us with that. Fire station, that would help the village. The nuisance ordinance, we're going to need funding, because one of the nice things about the nuisance ordinance is it allows for the public option where the town or the village could go in and actually make repairs. So we need funding to do that, or funding to make loans to individuals who want to repair their properties. Because we do know that there are people in town who can't afford to fix up their homes, and actually they want to. We can make long-term, very low-interest loans to those folks if we had funding to do it.
And what's the criteria for them to be applicable to apply for their loans?
Have to be a
Well,
low and moderate income household.
And
Yeah,
and
we would
what's
have some
that-
other criteria too.
And what is that parameter? Do you have that right off the top of your head?
80% of median household income.
For Wyndham County or?
For the county, right? I think they're generally.
Yeah, I don't have that number, but that's a threshold level for the grant. And then whatever policy the town puts in place to implement the penalty side of the nuisance ordinance, this provides, allows for the ability for folks to follow through on that, the enforcement rather than the penalty. And the only federal threshold issue is the low to moderate income, and who does the work. But town policy could set all of the other parameters.
Yeah, and town policy would set all the other parameters. We don't have that ready yet. For example, there might be certain areas that we want to focus on. Could be a lot of different criteria, and there should be. So then there would also be long-term impacts, which are the most important. Like we're talking about Chroma going up $3 million last year. That was because of past, years ago, economic development projects or efforts. So Shannon, if you can go down in that E column, there's some updated numbers. No, just go back one bit, because that was a number. No, okay, so the first one is that 1.3 million. So that's an estimate for, what is that?
So that's for 21 Adams Street. So the building spec that meets the design review district requirements for materials and type, and for the two prospective tenants, the two anchor tenants, I gave those criteria to the listers, and what they came back with was a between 1.2 million and 1.6 million evaluation. And that building is on half of the building lot, so when there's more tenants, the lot can be built out further. And so the reason it's 1,371,300 is because the property is currently on the grand list for $3,700. So that's the difference in grand list value in this column. So just like the concept of filling the pipeline and stacking costs, just like Wendy was describing the debt service. If you have what our cost to operate the town is $100 a year, and then each year you add bonds or debt service that's going to cost $10 a year for $20 a year. Within 5 years, you've all of a sudden the same $100 operating cost. You have $150 it costs. So what this allows you to do is keep up with some of the other piece. 2008, $1 in 2008 is equal to $1.19 in 2000 currently. So the way to keep up with the costs without having to cut things is by increasing the grand list. And these are long-term projects. So we have 5 different commercial industrial properties that over a 5 to 8 year span, we can add back to the grand list. So this column shows, and the reason I say long-term, like this project started, it's gone on a little longer than it should have, but it started in 2013, and it's 2020 when we hope to be building this building. So that's 7 years later. But that same concept of stacking the pipeline, so every time we get one of these projects, they overlap. So the grants, applying for the grants, doing the administration, some of my hours get reimbursed over as we administer the grant, we submit for reimbursement for the hours. But they're still ongoing while the next grant is applied for and the next building project is in play. And so so that piles up the time, but the long-term payoffs are there. If you scroll down to the bottom, and of course, the further out the projects are, the more wags they are. But still, there's a potential.
We updated it.
there's a potential $5.5 million on the 5.
There.
It's one column that we added. Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just added that today. I just got the dollars back from the listers and I didn't have that.
But all that, again, is contingent if you actually have received the grants.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we go to the full-time with development, that's approximately $39,000 to $40,000 a year before you get into the benefit stage and et cetera, et cetera.
39 or 40,000.
Well, 39,265 if you base it on a 52-hour week at $25.17 an hour.
Well,
What's the
so-
increment?
So I guess that,
The increase, the salary would be,
That's the salary part.
the
and then-
salary's
Right.
going up 20
Mhm.
for full-time. Also is assuming the 2%.
And the nice thing about full-time is we would get more than 40 hours out of it. It's,
It's a salary position.
you know that we would.
Well, that's what we like, so
Yeah.
it's a difference of salary, you know. All you can do for a little they wanna pay it.
You have a question? I'm ready to make my comment.
Go ahead.
So I think if we took away, I don't know how many there are on there, but bike paths, hiking trails, unnecessary, you can save 20,000 right there. Don't apply for those, focus your time on the other ones.
No, that's money we make from the grant administration.
I'm saying we don't need to be applying for grants for bike paths and hiking trails.
Yeah, that's.
Because you don't think it's a good source, or you don't think it's a good thing to do, or
How is that helping tax dollars go down?
it helps value of properties go up. People
It
really
brings
like
people
recreation.
to-
That's why the state's doing that whole program, the Vermont Outdoor Recreation. Actually, we'll talk about that.
I
later.
don't agree with everything the state does
So-
either, so
Yeah, no, we don't either.
I think that's a good place right there. Focus your
yeah,
time.
so just, I would like to respond to that comment before moving on. So if you look at gross receipts between 2000 and 2017, they've dropped from 145 million to 105 million. And we have a really full downtown, lots of merchants, and they struggle with the amount of our population and the amount of foot traffic. And we benefit from the vibrancy of the village, how many people come here, shop, and developing the outdoor recreation program and having that as destination tourism. All of the trails that we're developing are really close to the downtown. And all of the folks that come in will add to the vibrancy, the foot traffic, and the economic activity in our town. And property values in Rockingham are lower generally in the state. So a challenge that I discovered in trying to get investment in some of the properties is that it's because we have lower economic activity, and as that activity increases and there's more attraction and demand for our properties, those values go up in terms of market rate to the rest of the state. So just that one thing of building out our outdoor recreation program filters through to a lot of areas of helping the economy of our town.
Well, that's how I feel. I don't think the full-time position is necessary.
I disagree. I think it's beneficial to go to full-time, especially as we're now spending this time on this whole process with the community development. There's going to be funding opportunities that come out of that, and I think we need a full-time
Don't believe
person in there. So, I mean, I think the benefit outweighs the, I think we'll benefit from this, by going full-time. That's my view.
I am not interested in more staff. We have too much staff now. Half the budget is personnel. More personnel is not the answer.
I think looking to the future of the town is something that we're in charge of, and I think it is beneficial to have a full-time development director for that.
I disagree. We do not need more personnel, especially this year.
I kind of get the impression that what you're saying is you'd rather see certain items of this list focused on more than other items. And I know last year I mentioned that I was looking for more tangible results, and I understand part of the economic barometer is what you have down here in downtown. But I'm looking at more of a broader perspective of what else we have and creating tangible jobs for people that are in this community, that give them people hope, give them a revenue source to come down and spend money in our downtown district as well as elsewhere. I'm almost be inclined to go it again in the part-time capacity for another year and see how it works out. And I've stated that it's nothing any different. I look at the grants, I understand there's a lot of administration in there. And again, you know, we heard a lot about grants last year, and no insult to the two gentlemen that sit on the board with me, but we didn't get any grants for the fire trucks. So that's 2.5 cents. So I hear a lot about grants, but I think there's a lot of other people competing for those grants, and you know, some of us get them, and we don't. And I kind of think, unless you're wrong, unless I'm interpreting you wrong, Ben, a grant probably for an economic development program for a pre-development facility is a lot more important to you than trails, although I realize it's an element, but I kind of tend to agree with my colleagues. I think it's how you allocate the time from where I'm looking at.
Good time.
I'm not suggesting cut, I'm saying keep it at part-time. I didn't say cut the position. Increasing it to full-time, same discussion as I had last year. It's an important position. Increasing anything this year, I'm not interested in. That'd be more staff, I'm not interested in that. How, you said in the beginning, how much time do you have into this department?
What are you
It
allocated
depends
for
on-
a week?
I think he's asking, are
I'm
you,
sorry?
you mean me?
You.
Yeah, depends on how you define economic development. I mean, when we talked about it, just like having good codes, you know, nuisance ordinance, you can look at it as economic development.
How much do you feel you're involved in
A fair
what we're
amount,
paying Gary
a
today?
fair amount.
Fair amount.
And it would help me to have him be full-time.
In what
I'm
sense? You
sure
would spend more time on it together? Or
we would
it
get
would be
more,
less work for you?
we would get more done because,
More done in what sense?
in sense of getting more grants, we're developing better relationships with
Two
the
people?
agencies.
To write grants?
Yeah, and just to respond, to, come up with the ideas, to just talk to the folks who are doing the grants. Yeah, I mean, we're actually getting a pretty good reputation.
So it's
in the
pretty good
state.
that you're involved and he's part-time. If we had a different manager in place who didn't know a lot about economic development or focus, it would be important to probably have a full-time.
I think the benefits of making him full-time would outweigh the cost by far.
I'm just, I don't know if.
But I'm happy to be
I'm
doing what
comparing
I'm
that
doing. Yes.
You're invested and focused on economic development,
Yes.
so having you here, working with Gary, would in sense, perhaps one might look, there's more value in that than having a full-time developer, with a manager who is focused on other things.
I don't know. I don't know if that would be the choice. Previous managers have been focused on grant administration, which is a big part of economic development, and they've done more than I have in that part, in that area.
Yeah, I think Chip did a lot of that.
Yeah. Because there's getting the grants, there's administering the grants, and then, you know, looking long-term. We'll see later on when you look at the,
We have a lot of administrators.
yeah, there's a lot of administration, unfortunately.
We have a lot of administrators.
We have a lot of
We
administrators?
do, we have a lot of staff.
I don't think we're staff heavy. I mean, that's, government typically uses people to do its work. I mean, if we can't be automated, not yet. At some point maybe. But
Any more questions on that item? Gary, can you kind of give us a little, I know you went over this once before, but refresh my memory, I guess, on this, book walking tour in the YMCA, I guess, why is that in there?
That's reimbursed by grants, that's, Susan Rain and all of that. Whatever we reduce that by, we are gonna reduce revenue by.
It's the Historic Preservation Commission, which is the certified local government program.
Did we make a decision? Were we leaving that? As they have it written in, or are we reducing it?
If you want to make a decision tonight, that's fine. I'm getting the sense of the
Well, should
board,
we discuss it again in detail again?
I'm getting the sense of the board that they want us to keep the director at half-time.
So, if I may, what exactly, because the last time you were in here, there was some discussion on the YMCA building. Could you elaborate on that with specifics?
So the reason the YMCA is in there, one of the things that historic preservation does is Section 106, historic mitigation. When a historic property is demolished, you do an archaeological survey of the site. Was there any indigenous peoples' artifacts, burial grounds? That's basically all the YMCA is in there for, is for a survey of the site. Is that what you're asking, Stefan?
Well, so that is, the YMCA building is designated some historical capacity, is what you're saying?
Well, the neighborhood is, the whole area
Right.
is. And so part of the archaeological and Section 106 requirements in historic district, they can ask you, and we want to respect that aspect of surveying indigenous people's grounds. When you do ground disturbance, is basically the threshold
Right.
for the archaeological surveys.
The funds are being reimbursed by grants, though.
Well, yeah, so-
Discuss this at the last meeting?
I hear a lot about grants, I'm just saying, trying to get that.
No, these we get, this CLG grant, we get every single year, and in fact, we lowball the expense and the grant. This year, we received $12,000 back.
So what would that building standing there right now today, what would this, if you have this grant, what would it be utilized to do specifically with that property?
It would not,
It would not,
yes.
only if in fact if it had been demolished, is what you're saying, if I understand you correctly.
Yes. The survey is only for if it gets demolished. If it doesn't, that money doesn't get spent.
I don't foresee that happening within the next year, so I'm not so sure if that should be budgeted in here. And I'm a little bit not happy that, unless I missed it on this form here, that it's up there and I don't have it here. Have I missed it somewhere on this one here?
These are not, these are all discretionary grants that we
Right.
choose to submit or not. Grants, the CLG grant is, because we're one of the CLG communities with the state, we automatically reapply for that funding every year. It pays for a CLG coordinator.
Right.
I oversee that department, and I check the grant, and I'm aware of what it does, and I go to a lot of the commission meetings, but I don't actually administer that grant.
So
That's
how
not-
long is that grant good for? I mean, if nothing happens for a year, does that go in perpetuity in some respect?
So this is they're 18-month grants,
Okay,
and they go from January 1st
yeah.
until September 30th of the following year. So this grant would go from January 1st of 2021 till September 30th of 2022. So those grant funds could still be applied in the following fiscal year if that's when the project was done. Like I hear you telling me that on June 30th of 2021, nothing will have happened with the YMCA building, 18 months from now.
Right.
So if that's the case, if that work doesn't get done, the grant is still available to do that work until September 30th of 2022.
And it's only available for that specific purpose? You couldn't
So,
utilize-
so each year,
Yeah.
the commission, you appoint a historic preservation commission every year.
Right.
That's advisory to you.
Yeah.
Every year, they make recommendations on what to include in that grant. Their mission is to keep the community educated in historic preservation, to do surveys of historic parts of the town, to nominate to the register, to update when there's changes, and to create 3 educational programs a year for the public. They also host a old home award, which is for commercial buildings as well as homes.
Uh-huh.
But, so there's a number of programs that are annually in this grant. It pays the salary for the person who administers the grant, does the, and it pays for these projects, CLG projects as well.
So out of that 5,500, how much would be utilized on that YMCA building? Or assuming it was demolished?
So I don't have that grant budget with me. I can look that up and get that to you.
Go ahead.
So, with the CLG, how it works is, we put the same amount of revenue into doing as expenses, and all of Susan's salary is covered, part of Gary's salary to oversee it is covered, and then all of the expenses of the project. So if we do them, we wouldn't do them without getting reimbursed, and we wouldn't, so if sometimes we have more revenue and more expenses, but it's always all covered in full. And if we can't do it, then we don't have the expense and we don't have a revenue.
Even if it exceeds the grant amount, it would be covered?
We never exceed the
It
grant.
would never exceed.
That's not how the role of the CLG works.
So we'd be looking to see, if, for example, if it was an Indian burial ground or artifacts or whatever else it would be.
This would be a very minimal part of any expense for the YMCA. This will not make a difference in whether the YMCA gets redeveloped or not. I mean, it might make a marginal difference, but it's
It's important to do for the Historic Preservation Division, and they do have some thresholds, go, no-go, decision-making power over development in a historic town, and but it's a small amount. There's only certain things you cannot ask them to fund whatever you want. It's very prescribed. They often turn down things that the commission wants because it's not within their within what they're focusing on that year.
And if this activity or action wouldn't cause the village of Bellas Falls to be at a disadvantage
No.
for any actions they've taken or may take in the future?
No.
No. Okay.
Okay, so let's get back to the position. Are we making a decision tonight to keep the position at halftime? I'm getting the sense of the board that that's where we're going.
Should we wait?
We can do it again next week.
I
We have the
don't, I don't need to wait.
Okay, anyone else?
Good.
You're pretty all set, Stefan?
All set.
Okay, so shall we direct them to leave the position at halftime for another year?
It's actually like 30-something hours, it's not half-time, right?
Correct.
You wanna do that?
Sure.
Okay. We're ready to
Like I
move
said,
on?
I just want to say again that I'm against it.
Okay, so noted. Okay, page 8. Any questions on page 8?
social service.
Just a question about service agencies, or are there any others that are coming in that we're aware of, or is that what we're at?
The There's no others that we are currently aware of. There was the one addition from last year at town meeting, the senior solutions.
Okay.
I think the time frame isn't expired yet for someone to petition for, though, an article has it, I don't believe
I
that.
don't think so.
It has not expired yet.
I think you can even do it at noon.
There's still room for someone to apply, so.
Okay.
But we haven't received any
Right.
additions yet.
Right.
Okay, I'm gonna flip to page 8, page 9.
Yeah, so this is where we move fire department, see partway down, it's Rockingham Fire Department. That 12,500 went into an article.
Now, this is to establish this fund. Is this just Rockingham or is this department-wide? Can you just clarify?
This one is just Rockingham, but we would like to set up a funding mechanism for all 3 departments in the fire equipment fund. The fire equipment fund is established.
And that's what we would like
Yeah.
to transfer the 12.5 into.
Right, but the 12.5 would be a tax increase.
Good,
But this is for not major equipment. This is for, I mean, not, we're not talking fire trucks, obviously. We're talking, gear and so on.
Exactly. Gear and air tanks.
This year, they're still proposing that's what they want.
Yes.
I thought we had talked in the meeting and in general about buying in bulk as a townwide department.
So, we had 20,000 in there, and they would like 7,500 in their own budget and 12.5 to be put into the fire equipment fund. That's what they're asking for, instead of putting the full 20,000 into the fire equipment fund.
And this would be what, an article from the floor?
The 12.5 would be an article, the 7,500 would be in the budget as it's proposed, but you guys can
Would be in
change.
the budget then?
So we're not gonna be buying equipment in bulk?
We still could.
They wanna build the account, they wanna move 12.5 to an article to be transferred to the fire equipment fund, but leave 7,500 in their own budget. Like in case
Right,
they,
right. But
Yeah, we
I'm
haven't.
following you there, but they're listing what they want this year, whereas I thought we talked about.
yeah, so this,
Not doing
this
it.
listing was before we had talked about buying in bulk.
Hmm.
But their reasoning for wanting to leave the 7,500 in is like if they have one fire suit that's expiring and they need to buy it off cycle or whatever, if they don't have anything in their budget, they wouldn't be able to do it. Like, I guess they have 2 people right now whose
Mhm.
equipment is expiring next month, so if they zeroed out their budget, they couldn't just spend from the fire equipment fund.
And once again, I'll just encourage them to start looking at grant funds, because all those things that they're listing here could be covered by a grant.
Again, if you were fortunate or lucky enough to receive a grant,
That's true,
yeah.
but doesn't preclude them from applying for the grant.
Oh, no, I certainly,
Hopefully, we can recoup the
Yeah.
$7,500, that's ours.
I certainly encourage that, and I'm not saying prohibit it, I'm just saying that I hear a lot of talk about grants, and I followed it when I was selling equipment for my employer, and,
And this telephone thing, that's something they're gonna be keeping at that expense?
Yeah, they have that now, right, this engine.
Well, I mean, they're claiming it's 2 minutes before a pager. I mean, if that's the case, every department should have that.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. We need to check it out.
Is that really, is it?
We haven't had a chance to find out if that's true or not.
But that's what they all say.
Well, I think everyone would have that if that was the case.
Right, what would be really nice if it could reduce the mutual aid number, because that's a pretty high number.
well, I don't know if I'd see that happen.
Yeah, but, I mean, if there's some competition.
Well, I think we need to have have a little bit more intimate knowledge of that.
Oh, I'm not suggesting at all that we change.
Oh, no, I'm not
this, but
saying change, I'm
it's
just saying.
something worth investigating.
I don't think it works that way in the real world. I know the organization that I would serve with across the river, I'm trying to find the name of it, one's called, I won't mention it here, but it's available through the chief over there if you want to inquire. But before the tone I get from Keene, sometimes I'm getting it on my phone, so, you know, you could say it's redundant, you could say it does save maybe some time. But it is beneficial for me, I don't carry a pager anymore, and it's all right here in my phone.
Except for mutual aid. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's a
exactly.
different one, that they came in here and claimed they got 2 minutes before 415.
Yeah,
Knew about it.
I'm not familiar with it, but.
Okay, so we'll get some more information on that. Can we get down to unsafe buildings? We got 40,000 under unsafe building expense.
So we're transferring 40,000 from the unsafe building reserve fund that we created
Yeah,
into the budget and revenue so that we can use it on unsafe buildings. If we don't use it, it goes right back to the reserve fund. So the revenue will match the expenses for that. That's coming from taxpayers' dollars that
Passed.
the article
okay, no, I
passed.
just wondering what it was for. Any other questions on page 9? Okay, let's go to page 10. Anything on page 10? You have a note here, Wendy, about need to start depositing here for fire equipment reserves.
Right. Because we do. We haven't yet, but, that's just a note that that's what we need to, and that is what we can talk about next week, or in 2 weeks when we go over the long term. Because that'll be reserves, these capital projects. See, we put the meeting house, ceiling plaster in there. I don't know if that may have already been in your budget since it's not highlighted. But these are the ones where we want to just take a good picture of the long term.
Any questions on page 10 for anybody?
Just quickly, I don't know if I see it in this one, it was in the last one, it was called outside maintenance in addition to all the other maintenance under recreation. It was $5,000, and you said you would get the answer.
Yeah, that's one of, there's two things, I think we did go over it, but,
You
one
said
of,
it's a tennis court, redoing
One
the
of
tennis courts
Ryan's-
every other year.
employees,
So Wendy said,
Oh, right, the tennis court.
but they're asphalt, so I questioned why we would redo them every 2 years.
Yeah, it was crack filling, basically.
Every 2 years?
he does the tennis courts 1 year and the basketball the next. He alternates.
We're repairing them $2,500 a year.
I think that was in buildings and ground maintenance,
Is that
that $9,000 one, wasn't it?
And other, maintenance and upkeep of the recreation center.
Could we look into why we're spending $2,500 a year to repair the basketball, tennis court?
All set on page 10?
Just wonder what line you're talking about.
I don't know, I don't see
I
it
think
this
it's the
this
$9,000
week.
line.
It was
where
over
that
here
is.
last time, it said outside
I think
maintenance.
it's that building.
I asked what it was, and that was the answer I got.
Oh.
Because there was several maintenances. Buildings and
Ground
ground.
maintenance is 9,000.
Yeah, I think it's pretty sure it's part of that 9,000, right?
Do you have any comments or anything right now?
No, I'm okay right now.
Okay. If you have a question, come back to 10. It's on there, building and maintenance, grounds maintenance, it's got $9,000.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
The one we've been working with.
Yeah, it's right in there.
The one I've been working with
Yeah,
is different. So I have to
Oh.
go back to,
no.
we got a little
So you
one.
have anything, you all set?
Yep.
All right, page 11. My only comment here is the library item. We've been over the debt service, item. My suggestion is that we level fund the highway, the library budget to save $12,600. The 2020 budget is $379,250, and they're looking for a $391,850 this year. We did that, we were successful with that last year. Their fundraising is not up to snuff. They only have $800 of fundraising this year, and the last time when the library was here, we questioned them, and the answer we got was that they have another one coming up in the spring, so. I don't know. They were able to find the other money from the previous year, so I think we can repeat that again. Anybody have comments? Okay. Just mentioned level funding the library fund budget, what it was last year, save $12,600. Okay, you all set with that? We were successful last year with it,
Sure.
when we put it on as an article anyway, I mean, they can always change it at the town meeting, so 9 times out of 10, they will do it, just depends on who shows up for the meeting.
Okay.
I think a big part of their increase was the anticipation of a 12% increase in the health insurance incentive for them, because all of them are on the incentive, and that's gone. That increase is gone. But they had to put together their budget before we made our decision.
Well, I still think we should level fund it, because that may even,
Yeah, no, that's what I mean, I think that they might be able to do that.
well, that just. Page
Are
12.
we doing that?
I did change it.
Yeah. So,
Should track this. Making it.
I
okay, 12,
should be.
you guys still awake over there?
Yep.
I was talking to your brother and Mike over there.
Oh,
They're still with us,
I'm
apparently.
still awake, and I haven't had my coffee yet.
Oh, okay. I know it's early for you. Okay, page 12, cinema expense. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I just have new information. We owe you a list of the equipment, which I don't have for you, except I have it kind of verbally, which is the most important thing is the popcorn machine to
I was
replace.
just gonna ask about that, I didn't see it listed anywhere here, that's why.
Yeah, it was in the, in an older,
That may have.
when the committee discussed it, that was number one, and it's still number one. And that's about $12,000. And then we recently found out that we need to provide equipment for the hearing repair, which we don't have. That might be something we can find a grant for, but that's something that we'll need, and that's probably $2,000 to $5,000. So it would be covered in what's in the budget. You just asked for detail, and so that's what we would look at for that $15,000
Okay, so what is,
number.
The popcorn machine's not in here.
It's
Right?
not.
Yeah, I'm just updating as
Which
she
is
speaks.
12
so-
to 15, I thought.
Yeah, or 12. I think we get it for 12. We'll need to. Or what we might be able to do is buy some stuff. Oh, no, we can't. Yeah, we can before this fiscal year's end. I'm not suggesting that we change this budget at all. I'm just letting you know what I know.
What they'd like to propose to do with the $15,000 is a popcorn machine and hearing impaired equipment.
The Opera House Committee did not meet last night, they were going to meet last night.
So it's been removed from this budget we're working on.
It's not been reviewed. I'm
Where is it?
just
Wasn't included.
providing more detail.
Listed.
Like
The list.
You
this,
just said I don't wanna change this budget,
correct.
so I actually have to put 15 in there.
No, it's.
No, we don't have, it's the FY 21, the green
It's
highlighted.
the repairs and maintenance of equipment for cinema.
Yeah.
It's in green, it's 15,000.
Out of curiosity, what's
That's for the 4K projector,
No,
No,
ceiling,
that's-
lights, seats.
So they were supposed to meet last night those were, when we initially put together the budget, those were the Opera House's high-level ideas. As they've met more, they were supposed to meet last night to finalize their list, and they did not meet. What they would like to propose is the popcorn machine and the equipment for the hearing impairment.
but those items, those are much more than $15,000. Those are long-term, big ticket items. So it was just to give you a flavor of what is going to come is going to be a multi-year plan for upgrades to the theater.
The 4K projector, I know that at one point, when Rick was here doing the budget, he said something about they could update the current one.
Maybe, maybe not.
The 4K, which would save us a lot of money.
Yeah,
Versus buying
that's,
a brand new 4K.
that's not as much of an option as we thought.
Okay.
But we're not even close to
And the lights,
purchasing one yet.
the ceiling and the lights, you're assuming that's the plaster that hopefully to repair the falling plaster or something?
No, that would be other more intense repairs, because actually, hold on, let me think. We might charge the ceiling repairs there, just small ceiling repairs. But the funding next year is just gonna be barely enough to do the popcorn machine and
Okay, so-
the
and
audio system.
what's the
Last
lights?
time,
What's the lights? Is that the ones that don't work currently, or
No, that's the,
or is that something that's long?
no, this is a thing that goes at the front of the stage. That would be actually good for, live theater and, performances. Not just shows that, like, Main Street puts on, but also shows that we put on. It's something that works for both.
Go ahead. Yeah, but
not for it right now.
what's wrong with the current popcorn machine? Getting too poop to pop or what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually burned, I mean, it smokes and, yeah, it's past its prime. I mean, I can get you more details if you want, but
Just
it's
curious.
causing problems.
worn out.
Oh, yeah, actually, via,
Under theater equipment, we've got $5,000 there. What's with that? It's a $4,500 increase. We've had 1,000, then we didn't budget it.
yeah, I think that, let me find out and tell you. I think I know what it is, but I don't wanna tell you the wrong thing.
I know it's offset by the theater maintenance that was reduced, but it'd be interesting to see what that is. 13, page 13, that's the revenue for the highway and stuff. Actually, cemetery operations,
Theater equipment, I had asked that question way a long time ago.
Pardon?
That same question you just asked, I'd asked a long time
Well,
ago.
just trying to find out what it is.
And those were the two
That
that
was-
are on this list that we owe still. That the Opera House Committee is going to finalize.
Okay, are we ready to go to page 14? Class 2 paving grant, when are we eligible again for that? I know we're not gonna get any now, is it 2 more years we gotta hold on?
2 or 3.
2 or 3?
3 years, yeah.
I just wanna make a note of that in the board letter, that's all. So you figure we're gonna be 24 maybe before we get in?
I think it's 23. I've got that written, at least I can tell you. 2023 calendar, or budget, or probably summer 2022, so. So the FY '23 budget. is what we're planning on.
Okay, on that same page, can you explain the 21 budget proposal numbers? Because if you look at that, the same ones are there for 20 budget and 20 anticipated, but yet the number totals on the bottom are different. You got 2,728,844, and then on the 21 proposal, the same numbers listed, 67, 636, 931, 1240, 49216, it says 2774962. So is there something, what happened to the 21, 188, I guess? I don't know. What went up or what went, it's revenue, so.
I'm so sorry, I'm not following what you're asking. I'm sorry. Can you just say that one more
Yeah,
time?
if you look at those last three columns, the
Uh-huh.
numbers are all identical. 16,7,
No, in order to level fund the highway so that the expenses match the revenue, the property taxes went up. In FY '21, they went up $21,188.
I know that, but the numbers, you add those same three plus 5 or 6 numbers, they're not gonna equal 2749.
Right, well, it's because the expenses are different.
No, those
and the-
numbers don't have anything to do with each other. This 2749672 is the difference of all of the non-property tax revenue and the expense.
Okay, no, it just looked odd to me, that's why I was just checking to make sure I wasn't error there, that's all.
Yeah, it does look odd.
Yes.
Because
But
the,
it's-
but the
it's-
budget from FY '20 to '21 changed. The property tax numbers change depending on the expenses and the other non-property tax revenue.
Okay. Anybody else on 14?
Yeah, and just note the $200, which is ridiculously low
Right.
revenue.
Yeah,
I mean,
did
but we
talk.
have to increase those
We
fees, but
talked
we
about
haven't budgeted for that.
Okay.
But we need to increase
Well,
those fees.
We can always change those after the fact if we have to.
Yeah, and because it's revenue,
Just
we're
leave
being conservative.
Okay. Are we ready to go to 15?
Yeah.
Differential pay is quite high. Why is that?
So in the previous year, I was just, I had just got here for the budget, and so I was thinking, when we did the budget, we were thinking the overtime was gonna be more, but it's actually, we're gonna come in closer to, it's at a 50-50 for overtime and differential. So between overtime and differential, we're actually not increasing at all. It's just that one's going up and one's going down. Because we had overtime pay at 64,
Yeah, I
and the
follow where it's
differential at
going from,
10, but to
My question
closer,
is, I wonder why it's so high.
it's not so high, it was just allocated wrong. We have more differential pay than we do overtime.
And now we know what it is,
Right.
because this was all lumped into wages previously, but we wanted to get a
Yeah.
handle on
Right,
what
I
it
didn't
was.
follow that.
In FY '19, you guys budgeting, you asked us to pull it out of, FY '20, you asked us to pull it out. We started allocating it in FY '19, but when we did the budget in FY '20, we hadn't had an actual figure yet.
So, dramatics in form here, Public Works Director position. Are we ready to discuss that tonight? Comments?
Sure, when are we gonna discuss it?
Right now,
Okay,
throw it out. You wanna start off?
nope.
Okay.
Well, you asked if we wanted to discuss it, but I asked when would we discuss it if we didn't discuss it. These are the things we need to discuss.
Okay, so we can discuss it now. So, what the board's pleasure?
I've said several times tonight that we have to reduce taxes. And to do so, we are overstaffed. and that's how you will do it.
Okay. Ben, you have a comment?
I'm not 100% convinced it's a necessary position. I don't know if it's something that should be just part-time or not. I wasn't on the board when you guys brought it back. I know it went away and then came back. But I'm not convinced that it needs to be a full-time position.
Okay. I always have a quandary when it comes to this position for the same reason. We know that, and Mike's admitted himself that he can't do this with everything else he's doing. So how do we handle the RFPs, et cetera, that need to get done in the scheduling? I assume you're doing the scheduling, correct, Everett? Correct me if I'm wrong.
We don't have any projects, we're maintenance division. We have staff that can write RFPs. We brought the position back to try it, what we were promised we would get. Very expensive position, if you look at it, it will remove 2 cents.
Oh, I agree with that.
We don't have any projects coming up that we're gonna do, or maintenance.
Well,
We have a municipal manager, we have executive assistant, we have other folks who can write grants.
Okay. Stefan, you got comments?
I've sat here over the course of history, I guess, both with and without. What I would is ask the department head. I've seen the list of the proposed projects which is available to the board, but if in the event you were not to be here, what would you see that would not get done that should be done?
I have to dig that list up and I can have it next week. Thanks.
There's some head walls, repaving. Head walls would subcontract to someone.
It was in the,
Yeah, we gave you a lot of this.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah. Well, I think it, actually, when you're under RFPs completed July 18th to October 9th, 2019. So, dated January 3rd, 2020, memo to Wendy from Everett. So.
You want him to answer your question?
Well, yeah, that's what I was wondering, I'm looking at it here. I know we tried to put some priority on the stuff that had to be done. I know right now we're looking at reducing paving next year in the amount of $50,000. We're looking at reducing the reduction of contract sidewalk services in the amount of $50,000. So that'll be, what does that equate to? Say, for example, $50,000 in contract sidewalks. How many feet is that of sidewalk that would not get done?
If we were talking about going down to 30,000, 50,000 down to 30,000 sidewalks.
What's the decrease?
Why would that be?
Well, I'm just curious. I'm just trying to think. If we allocate monies elsewhere, maybe we wouldn't be reducing sidewalks by 50,000. I'm just.
But just a correction, we're not reducing paving necessarily, we're not increasing it like we were planning for the schedule for the, paving, project.
250 instead
We're
of
leaving
300.
it steady, we're not reducing it, we're just not increasing it like we had planned. We had originally thought.
We're not increasing it, but it says here we're decreasing the expense.
Right, but I mean, it's remaining steady, so it's from this current fiscal year. As opposed, it just means that we will get perhaps a little bit less paving done than is on the paving schedule. Or Everett would have to reallocate how things are gonna get, paved.
Get a cost estimate in here, 1,000 feet of 5-foot concrete sidewalk, and what that would cost. Compared to asphalt. So if we did 1,000 feet of 5-foot concrete sidewalk, we're roughly 38,664. If we did the proposed sidewalk work, 600 foot in concrete, 250 foot in asphalt, we're at 30,000, so. I mean, I know there's a lot of things you can do with that position equates into about $119,000 of expenses, but I'm just thinking of what may or may not get done if that position was not there.
I think history shows that projects don't get done, that's why you have such a huge fund balance in the highway department.
I think maybe we should let Mike speak to it, just because he,
Yeah, so about a year ago, I went to the then manager and said that we're not doing any progression. We're, as Gaetano says, we're maintenance, and that's what we were doing. A lot of maintenance got done. But there's a lot of big culverts that we have that are failing. They've been failing since Irene, and they're gonna need to be done. What happens when they fail? The roads are gonna fail. And who's gonna engineer these projects? It's not as simple as throwing a piece of pipe in the ground. Now, that's just one example. Burt Park and Blake Street. If he wasn't here, who would have done all that engineering on the earthwork? I can't do it.
We probably wouldn't have done it, because
You
it
probably
wasn't our
wouldn't have,
project.
right, 'cause
It
you
wasn't our
wouldn't have paid
project, we got talked into it.
Well,
It's a
it
six-figure
needed it.
position,
It needed it.
we could subcontract the things we need to do.
Yeah, can I
And
check out the
you're gonna pay more.
You were gonna pay $500,000 in the future, you
We-
got it, you
We
got
had
it
a
for-
full-time DPW person, it was a village project that we got talked into doing early because it would save all this money.
It did,
So we may have not voted that way, which I wasn't in favor of.
saved 200,000, we got it for 300,000, and we got a better project, and we got it earlier. I mean, time value of money, the people who lived there got the project, what, 4 years earlier, something like that?
This position saves the town a lot of money, whether you believe it or not. And he has, over the years he's been here. And the money he's made when he wasn't here in a full-time capacity, being hired as part-time is ridiculous. And that's what we're gonna go back to. We're gonna hire outside firms
For what projects?
for any
For
big
FY
project that
21
requires an engineer.
Projects,
Any project that requires. an
in his
engineer.
list that he prepared
Yeah,
while working here,
yeah.
what projects would we need to subcontract or have outside engineering for?
High hill
That
drainage.
isn't in the budget.
Yeah, it's gonna be an article.
It's gonna be a time you're gonna need it. And you're gonna pay for it.
Yeah,
like we have
this
been.
page has
We've
all
been
the
paying
capital
for it for years.
projects.
He's done a lot this last few months, he's been here, a lot. RFPs, the manager's gonna have time to put all those together? I doubt it. Shane made me try it, and I failed miserably, so we called Everett up to do it. You're gonna need the position, that's my opinion, you can take it for what it's worth.
Appreciate it. There's a 3% increase in the tax with shifting a bunch of stuff around that'll still get passed on to the taxpayer.
I realize
So
that.
we're looking to cut some spending
I realize that.
in a tight budget.
Every
We've
year.
gone through this thing, we're
Every year.
discussing $500 items to go, we keep going and going to reduce spending. And
I
now
guess-
we have 2.84 cents more to go.
I don't think it's good practice to cut a position like this, not at all. It's not good to the taxpayers, it's gonna cost them more money in the long run.
I just wanted, I would say also, if you look at the last two meetings, when town meetings, there was support for this position to come back.
A lot of support.
Because we had a bunch of projects coming up. We had the
We still
downtown
have a lot of
project,
projects coming
we had
up.
the downtown
We have
project.
a lot of projects coming up.
One at a time.
not this year we don't. That was a
We
big
have
project,
meetings
that's,
on the schedule.
that's what convinced me for my vote to bring the DPW back, and what we were promised, I didn't see. We had big projects coming up, that's why we brought the position back.
We have a lot of stormwater
And we
projects
still have
coming up.
projects coming up.
We had
I
big
don't know where you're
projects.
saying that we don't have projects coming up. We have a paving schedule we have to adhere to. We've got state regulations that are gonna be coming in line now for these culvert projects for the hydrologically protected roads, we have to be thinking for the long term. I know we're in a situation now because our debt services are very high, that this is overall the budget is a big hit. But if you get rid of this position, I don't know if we'd ever be able to bring it back, because who in their right mind would come to a town that brings that position back and then 2 years later
I don't
gets
know.
rid of it again?
I don't know, but they did that the last
But
time.
I think it's short.
But for your long-term vision, you have to reduce your spending for the short term. You can't continue to keep spending money the way we do.
I think we have town support, according to the last town meeting,
I
for
don't
this
know.
position.
Well, we would see what happened at town meeting day.
Then we leave it as is. And if people want to cut it, then they can put on the floor a reduction.
Okay, I disagree. Not in favor of increasing taxes 3 cents. In addition to the rest of
And if
everything.
the highway fund is going up, I mean, if it's increasing, it's what, at 21,000? So it's a half a cent for highway, and highway is the majority of what services are to the town. And you said earlier, we would not be reducing services. If we eliminate this position,
I
we
disagree.
would be reducing services.
I disagree.
We would definitely reduce
I
services.
disagree.
Okay,
Ton of staff here.
not really. I mean, we can show you, we have,
We'll show you. There's more that needs to be reduced.
Question, did you do any engineering on that Bird Park? Or was it done?
No,
with
did
the
all
Franklin
the
Ring?
road, did the profile, the alignment, cross sections, all the earthwork, sidewalks.
Yes, Dufresne Henry.
He could have done the whole things if the village had chosen.
Dufresne did the water sewer. That's what
It
they
was,
did.
you know, it was built into the bond, right?
Village didn't want a DPW position.
Yeah, no, they did.
Their big position.
They.
Did it cost them less money to not fund that position, to subcontract their work?
No, I'm just trying to get some information on the floor.
It's,
Dufresne did the engineering design and the engineering supervision of the water wastewater. We paid them for just the supervision $60,000 for supervising Burt Lake and Mill Street.
For one project.
Well, Burt Lake and Mill. So for maybe 3 months of work. Everett did the elevations, he did stormwater, he was out there watching what was happening, he re-engineered as it was happening. His personal knowledge of the history of the town and where its stormwater goes was super important at that point, because if we had had a hired engineer who didn't know the town, they wouldn't have known to look out for those things. So you have a significantly better product at hundreds, at least 100,000, probably 200,000, we don't have all the final numbers yet, less than you were planning on paying. So that one project shows the benefit of that position. Coming up in the future, the stormwater requirements are much greater than they have been in the past. We talked about a stormwater utility. That's something that Everett would be hugely valuable in looking at. We're going to have to find other funding for stormwater. It's going to be very expensive, and there's going to be grants to find funding, but there's not going to be grants to fund it. It's just too expensive. That's going to have to be funded by the property owners. And that position is necessary. Shannon and I won't be able to, it'll take away from our other work, doing the RFPs.
So,
I don't even know a lot of the information on his RFPs. I wouldn't be able to come up with that information.
when's our next select board meeting before we finalize this budget?
2 weeks.
21st.
That's 2 weeks.
And that's when we're also gonna look at long-term planning, because the peaks of debt are next year and the following year.
Right.
So that's what we wanna show you, is how the taxes can level off. There would be some reduction, but
Right.
you can't expect a reduction every year. I mean, that's just not
goes up,
reasonable.
goes up every year.
No.
It went down last year.
We've also
I
had
say that every time because we move money around.
No, it went down last year because the value went up.
Well, we also borrow from the fund balance, and so that made difference. This year, we're trying not to
But
take.
you borrowed less than you did the year before.
And you had a huge fund balance, the taxpayers had already.
If your spending is out of control, we borrow money, I mean, it's a bizarre concept to go further into debt. Spending more than we have,
We have found savings that
rather
you
than,
guys,
I mean,
I guess the negative aspect to look at is when we did the paving and the sidewalks downstream, and we hired a outside engineer from Perkinsville to do it before it ever came on. And you look at what we got for the bucks. So, I mean, that would be my,
what do you mean?
well, everybody complained about the work to get done.
That was project management.
Well, that's your opinion of it, and.
The engineer didn't pave the road, the engineer didn't
Well,
put
I
the
know,
curb
but
stops in
Did he
different
look,
nights.
did he was here overseeing the project?
We hired a DPW to oversee project management, that's when we brought him on.
Okay, I'm just.
Project management,
Throwing
I
that
don't
on
want
the
to rave
road to
about
get
Burke
information.
Street, which was done by,
Let me just address this.
Professional
This has been-
contract.
hang on a second.
One
This
at a
has been
time,
beat to
one at a
death.
time.
Yeah.
This has been beat to death before. This was a spec that was put out before I was here. Mike will tell you, it was a nighttime paving job, it was not project management.
who was supposed to manage it? Who was supposed to be responsible
We
for
were
the,
there.
for
We
the
were there.
finished product?
We've gone through it. Mike was there, it was a nighttime thing, but it was a no spec that said anything about the height of those, the drain manholes. We've been through this.
It was my decision to leave them alone. We've talked about it a million times. We beat it to death.
So,
When does it end? Can't fix it.
Take
Until
comment
time
from-
comes again to redo it.
Do you have a comment
I'm
there?
not weighing one way or the other, I just want to go back to where both of you were on the board, some was it now, close to 10 years ago or longer, when this position was cut by the select board, along with another position. There was town support to do that at the time. There must have been logical material behind that to base the decision to do so on. So, what was the reason? Why would you do that if you realized later on that you would spend more money with an engineer, with outside engineering firms? So you know, you were on the board, so what was the logic there at that time to do what is maybe considered now?
The logic there was the fact that we didn't do a lot of the paving work or whatever had to get done. We kept putting it off, which is where we got into the hole that we are now and why we're trying to do more and increase the paving balance. The other was a tax situation that we're dealing with today. We needed to cut the budget somewhere, and that was the position that was done. I think there's some personal intuition that came into it, to be honest with you, and I think that's all weighed into it. Maybe not so much, but the fact was the matter that it was the tax rate and the fact that we didn't do a lot of projects because of that to save money. That's where it boiled down to. And now we're back up to spending hundreds of thousands of money for paving projects and other projects to bring it back up. We weren't doing, equipment replacement back then. That started a little while ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago. That's added to the total bill. And as Sue says, it's voted at town meeting, so, we can only suggest that if the town wants to cut it, every time somebody comes up and says, let's cut 200,000 out of it, it gets drowned out, and generally goes back through, and it gets paid.
Well, if we have to the 21st for the board to make a decision, could we present it for the next meeting, with it and without it?
Do you guys want it printed with or without, or just?
Well, we know what we could save if that position.
Well, no, I realize that.
So,
Yeah,
I don't think we need to change the budget. I think Sue's got probably one of the easier tack is to leave it in the budget, and if the people so desire to cut the budget, then we can cut it where we want, and if that's a point that they say cut $100,000 out of the budget, then we got an idea where we can go with it. If that's their desire.
And what I'm saying is, there is time between now and the 21st to, I'm sure people are watching, I know I've had feedback when I spent time out here. But we can take a look at, step back and take a breather and make sure that that's what we wanna do or not what we wanna do.
It's 2.5 cents.
Now, I know what it is.
Oh, well, you're asking to see it with and without.
Right. Well, I understand that's what it is without. I think I'm asking at the moment, we make the decision on the 21st.
Okay.
Do we need more information?
Well, I'm gonna take a look maybe and see what we have for projects. I wanna hear
I
some.
mean, I think we're all
Maybe that's
playing here
more
with
feedback.
people speaking up about personal things and why we need this position. If we don't need to, and valid points getting negated and people getting upset because I'm bringing up things that I feel were done incorrectly that cost people money. What if, I mean,
All right, then let's
what
go.
are we doing in the winter months with RFPs and engineering
We are doing RFPs
In
with
reference to
engineering, and we're doing long-term
and
planning.
six-figure full-time position?
He's
A
busy.
long-term plan?
We do a lot of long-term planning, or he does. That's what all of these schedules are about, is long-term planning. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do for the meeting next time, so that we can give you a consolidated highway projects and equipment and fire. But we want to get all those together, and it takes work to put all those plans together. So Everett's critical to that. He's busy. We actually looked at his hours. I just got it today though.
Okay.
What he looks.
I mean, we already have that plan, right? We have the updated sidewalk plan.
He just
We have that
updated
plan.
it. We have to update it.
We have that plan, we have the sidewalk plan.
We'd have to pay someone to update these.
Correct.
Or not do it, or not do
Correct.
planning, or not do paving. We get behind on paving.
No, I'm not suggesting that.
That's what would happen. I believe we would get behind on paving. Unless you want to contract out for someone for the same amount of hours or close to the same amount of hours, which would be more money. Contracting
I
out would
disagree.
be more money.
Disagree with that.
Do you disagree that contracting out is more money per hour?
I disagree that we would spend more.
Okay, well, I think we did in the past, spend more. And then we lose the oversight of the highway department, because an internal person can do things that an external person can't. Actually, our situation with Dufresne is a great contrast, because they're really solid engineers and I'm happy with them, but they're expensive.
They're paying for it,
Yeah, and the way that I think the village is able to swallow that is that much of it is paid for by grants. Most of it is paid for by the loans, the negative
Well, the
interest
bonds.
loans.
But
Yeah, well, negative interest is essentially a partial grant, I think 40% grant. So we pay Dufresne on a total dollar basis a lot. They do planning, they do engineering. It's not always just when we have projects, but there's ongoing permitting requirements. There's also actually a lot of coordination with the state that Everett has to do or gets to do. The annual reporting, we have actually the Depot Street Bridge coming up. Hopefully someday the Bridge Street Bridge will come up again. The Church Street Bridge is happening. That's all gonna take coordination with V-Trans. So there's,
We need outside engineering for all those things, right?
not for coordination, no, because V-Trans has engineers.
What do you mean coordination? Do we need an
Just-
engineer to coordinate?
Yeah, and
You
to,
do?
yes, and, just last week and a half ago, we had a
All right.
meeting with those engineers and just pulling water, wastewater together.
We rehabbed Bridge Street Bridge, we hired an outside organization to engineer.
Oh, okay, I wasn't here then, I don't
You
know.
just mentioned water and wastewater. Why are we getting involved with town?
Well,
responsibility?
whenever he works for, and it actually hasn't done any work for water, but wastewater, like, we have a break in the road, everyone's affected, we have to coordinate. It would cost much more, both in terms of dollars and in terms of just loss of usage of the road if we didn't coordinate. When we had that, sewage spill on, by 7-Eleven, highway was very much involved with that, cause they have to be.
We bill, the wastewater department for Everett's hours for whatever he,
Yeah, it hasn't even been that much, it's been about a week total.
40 hours for so far this year.
But we do.
What's the engineer have to do with your water break by 7-Eleven? Did I miss something?
I'm just saying, it's,
Well, you're referencing.
he actually did, he can help figure out how to put things back together without
Did he?
hiring.
Or did the wastewater and highway guys put it back
Well, yeah, I mean, the wastewater guys, but there's all kinds of situations like that, like the one,
together? It looked like
the
most
School
highways to
Street
me.
one.
We did school in Atkinson Street. That
The
was
school in
more so,
Atkinson, that was engineered, right?
Yeah,
Didn't we do that one 3 times?
We did, that was not a
Twice?
mistake. That
Twice,
was,
because we couldn't do it, we didn't have the equipment to get deep enough to do it.
Was it engineered?
You did.
well,
But we did it incorrectly after it was engineered, or?
you talking about School Street intersection?
Yes.
That was engineered. The breakdown here was not engineered. I had minimal involvement. It was just orchestrated.
alright, so,
Couple phone calls, that was it.
I know, but that's what she's referencing, so
alright, so tell them about School Street. I'm just saying, the coordination is really important.
It's very, very
Sometimes you
important.
need an engineer, sometimes you need a highway director, public works director. But do you wanna tell them about the School Street? I don't know if it matters.
That was one of those small, simple design,
Yeah.
some coordination, put out, did an RFP, get the results. Oversee it when they did it.
Okay, it seems like we can't quite get our heads on this one, at this time. I think Stefan has our ideas. 21st, we come here prepared to make a decision one way or the other. Moving along, let's go down to miscellaneous contract services. You got surveying 15,000. Can somebody tell me what that is? What's going on with that?
Yeah, let's try to figure out where the right-of-way lines are. Or that's the.
Peter, I'm gonna try to stay on the call, but I gotta leave the hotel, because I'm holding up about 20 families. So, if I get cut off, that's why, because my internet.
Yeah, we're almost done. The rest of the stuff on the agenda isn't really, that pertinent.
Well, I'll stay on if I can.
Yeah,
Cell
okay.
service.
All right, no problem. I got you.
All right.
Okay, so going back to the survey, what's that? You got 15,000 in there for contracted services or engineering services.
Yeah, surveying, which is what we had in the,
I know we
have the
talked
current
about this
budget
one
too.
before.
Right. No, that'll be going out shortly. Now things are getting caught up, and one of the things we gotta put out is, get that RFP out there so we can do Joe Debo or a couple other local surveyors to start working on it. It'll be a multi-year process. It's not gonna be someone gonna do these right away in a year or two. But even Mike can attest, there's no one road you can go into this town and find out if someone's working on it. The right way is right here. You can't point to anything. Yeah, and every road is different. The rods are different on every road. You can't assume they're 3 rods. So generally you can assume that out in the far country, but you do a project, there's no way you can.
Blake Street was a good example. Birch Street.
Yeah, Birch Street, yeah. So we'd like to eventually end up with a map that helps the next Mike down the road, or even beyond Mike, because this could take, like a 10-year process.
I know there's 3 in Second River, I know that.
Ellen had a good record start on stuff. They're still not official documents, but
That's who I still use.
you still use them, yeah.
I have
Okay, pavement maintenance, you got a note here, does not include Pleasant Valley Road. Is that because we're reducing the 50,000? We'd have to go back to the roll to know, something we changed around from the first.
To do the next phase of Pleasant Valley Road, you're looking at about 120, so it didn't look like a year to do the other half, so it's like, it just wasn't put in there. Well, it will stay as is, Pleasant Valley Road, maybe we can drag some a little bit, there's a couple spots. But we did the worst of it was done this summer. Or last summer.
Any further questions on 15?
I can't read the phone, so be quiet.
We hear you, Sue.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying to figure out how to mute my phone and I can't, so.
Okay, page 16.
Bridges.
Is that program set up for real time?
I'm making the changes.
So we have a new one at the bottom with, keeping the area at 30 hours
Yeah,
and small ones.
I'm doing it as we speak.
Depot Street Bridge. What are we gonna do with that, folks?
Yeah, that's not even close to what we need,
I was
but
gonna say
it's
it's
a start.
$1,000 there, I know, we gotta think about that.
Right.
When's that scheduled for construction, 23, 24?
23.
23?
We talked a couple of meetings ago about starting it off at 20, and then maybe stepping up year after, like 30 and then 40. And then I think leave 50 or maybe go 60 after that, but
Yeah.
just to get the process started.
We need to think about putting some money aside for that.
And there will be some bills coming in, you know, the engineering has started, so there will be bills coming in. A little bit this year, but mostly rolling in next year and the year after.
And that agreement will be coming to you next meeting, I expect.
And we're reducing sidewalk replacement. Looks like.
From 50 to 30. First proposal you saw was 50,000. You can see the list that Stefan pulled out earlier. Couple of us talks about sections that'll be done.
I know, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I know it's not pertinent, but it is because we all are Americans. Just got a news organization thing from NPR here that says a U.S. military base in Iraq has been attacked by Iranian missiles. Yeah.
Hey,
Anything else on page 16? 17. Equipment repairs. Let's go to page 18. So I left everything there.
Sorry?
Okay. Last page, 20, any questions? Hearing none, I guess we're finished with that review.
Was he new amount? Or we just
I think
spent
shaved
several hours on that,
I
so
think
it's
we
like,
might shave the penny off, I think.
I don't think so.
But I'm not sure.
Well, if we could, because I know I'll get asked about this, with the equation of no DPW director, and an equation with that, could you have that tonight? If you're typing it in there, let us
As
know
soon as
what
she
that
gives
is.
that to us, we could just subtract
2.5
the number she
Yeah.
called.
Which would put us at what? Below level funded, right?
We'll find out in a second, Stephanie, once she gets us that number.
I think you're gonna find that something about the
So I need like 15 minutes to to pull these numbers.
Well, we got time, I believe, if that's all right with the chairman and the rest of the board, I think.
well, it is 8:30. Up to you guys.
Well, we got a couple
We
of
got
articles to discuss also.
I don't know.
Yeah, you guys, we don't wanna give you numbers that are not good numbers. Shannon,
Well,
if you're not sure, I mean, we can get you something first thing in the morning.
Well, I disagree. The press is here tonight. I know there are people at home watching.
I would just like to say, I don't think that you ever got
Yeah.
changes in the tax calculations at 8:30 at night immediately after you made changes to a budget.
Well,
I can do it for you, but then I don't want you to quote me on the numbers.
Well, I'm not gonna quote you, but I mean, I'd like to have an idea.
I don't think it's necessary to do it right now. I kept somewhat track while we were going through it. Right, so no,
You didn't
so-
change that much.
correct, we didn't change that much.
Yeah.
But that's why I had asked the question if it was real time.
It is.
So the
real
notes
time.
you made,
The budget's.
which
real
we
time.
had before, we had that before, we have had that before. That same program where we sat in this room and then it gave us a new updated tax rate.
Yeah, so I'll sit over here and do it while you guys do that. I can't, it's not in the same spreadsheet. I can put it into the tax calculator. It's, like, I think it,
Okay, we can
Yeah,
go on to the next.
it's just an
item.
opportunity for error. That
We'll,
you guys
we'll come
don't
back to
like
that,
when we make
just
mistakes.
so we can keep this going along here. Development Office, Gary Fox, Board grant.
So, this is the updated grant. It's due on January 20th, so it's still, the team met yesterday, it's still in process.
Reconsider.
So this is the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Program. It's something that is a state initiative. It's a regional initiative from both the Department of Health and Economic Development. In our region, we have the Scenic Riverfront Park and Trail System. It starts in downtown. We have the Saxons River Valley Trails Initiative. Which are new trails, the Bald Hill Committee, which are existing trails behind the high school. We have the new trails that have been expanded by Wyndham County Trails Alliance up by Oak Hill and the top of the rec area. The vision is for all of those trail systems to be connected, to be a destination for recreational tourism, as well as use for the school systems, residents. And the rec area would be a central spot for it. Our town rec area, there's a kiosk there. A lot of the funding in this particular grant, besides the engineering work to connect the trails, is for a pump track at the rec area, construction of a pump track. And the budget for that item, actually it didn't print on here. But the cost for the program is $30,000. Includes wayfinding and the kiosk in the center of town. let's see, the grant would provide $19,000 of that. A grant for knotweed management provides $3,500 of match. And we're looking for $7,500 from the development fund for, I should say up to $7,500 for culvert work. The area at the town rec department between the ski hill and the ball field, which is kind of overgrown, has a stream that runs down through that area. So the drainage and culvert would be put in, the area would be leveled, and a pump trap installed. Mapping services are included, and marketing with the wayfinding. And that's the basic nut of this grant. The project team includes a cross-section of organizations. Rockingham Conservation Commission supports that, supports the project, as does the Bells Falls Community Bike Project. The Wyndham Hill Pinnacle Association is a parent company of the Sackville River Valley Trail Initiative and the Bald Hill Trails. Mountain bike manufacturer, Frank the Welders organization supports it. The school system is involved. And the Vermont Mountain Bike Association supports it and is involved in the project team. Are there any specific questions that I could answer? Yes.
What's a pump track?
I was just gonna
Okay,
ask
your question.
Gary's gonna explain it to me, so.
So it's a miniature version of when you see dirt bike racing, large tracks, and basically it's used by all age levels in different ways. So younger elementary school kids gets them outdoors using their radio-controlled vehicles that go over the track. Elementary, middle school kids ride the track to learn skills, safety skills. And part of the programming that goes along with this is school system, rec department and bike project running safety and riding skills programs in the pump track. It's at the training grounds. Adults use it to learn mountain bike skills, so when they go on the steep trails up at the top of Oak Hill, they've developed the skills on the mountain bike to be safe doing that in the woods. It's the pump track. Any other questions?
There's a suggested motion in the staff report, in that memo, overall one.
Somebody wanna make a motion?
Do you want me to?
It's on a memo, second page. There are matching grants and the matching funds in there somewhere.
Yes, there's a Muskoma grant for $3,500 for the trail maintenance for the knotweed issues that's matched. And there's up to $7,500 for the culvert and the site work for water mitigation at the rec area from the development fund.
So, the 17,000 you're asking for, is there any matching funds from the town?
Yes, up to $7,500 from the development fund for whatever the cost is for the culvert on the, at the rec area, at the pump track.
Okay, do we have that in the budget anyway?
No, we would put it in the budget. We get it. Or, I mean, that's something we can find money for. It's actually be a good improvement to have in any case over there.
the proposal from the development fund is it doesn't impact the annual budget or the tax rate.
Right, because it's from the development fund, so it doesn't, it's
Well,
not,
how much money is it? Isn't
it's
it?
the 7,000, then just,
Up to 7,500, whatever the
Okay.
site where a culvert ends up costing.
All right, then I'll make the motion for the Rockingham Select Board to move to approve, approval to submit the application to the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative Community Grant Program and authorize the municipal manager to execute necessary documents.
Second.
Second. Motion made and seconded, further discussion? Sue, you here, still on there? Guess not. Okay, I think we still need to go with a voice vote in case she's got us on mute. Okay, hearing no further discussion, all those in favor will vote aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carried.
You can do a roll call.
Thought I did a voice vote.
You want to do voice vote?
I
Okay,
thought somebody
Ben?
to Ben, aye.
Gaetano, aye.
Peter Golak, aye.
Step on.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thanks.
What do you have next?
the TLR stabilization and train station. So these are alternative, town meeting articles, and we're gonna talk about these also on January 21st, so if you wanna get down the other stuff, that's fine. But they are, samples of articles to present at town meeting. One is for the TLR buildings, is to stabilize the buildings. Remember, we did not get the grant. They're both $120,000.
So the principle with the TLR grant, the TLR stabilization is that there's some work there that needs to be done to secure the buildings from further degradation and for safety. Some of the overhead passes that are coming out of the building. The state did not feel like the community had shown that it wanted to preserve the TLR buildings because the last action that we had on it was town meeting in 2016, and there was an article to demolish the buildings, and town meeting voted it down. And they didn't feel that voting down demolition is the same as supporting it, voting any funds toward it. So this article says up to $120,000. The work by an engineer is specified in the article. It's described and there's pictures of it there. And the reason is it's up to $120,000 is there is the possibility of the community doing some of the work with volunteer work. And I don't know if Gaetano wanted to speak to that at all, but that is one of the possibilities that has been brought up. And also up to $120,000 because there's low items and high items on each of the engineering aspects.
And let's just add, these buildings are do something now or say bye, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this
yeah.
is the time to either say bye to the buildings or do something. So this is the chance for the community to make that choice.
Mr. Chairman, if I may think out loud, could our in-house engineer be involved? Take care of the engineering on this?
I think we're gonna get a structural engineer.
Structural engineer?
And we've had a structural engineer. But the point of it is just
What's
to
that?
ask the community, are they worth preserving? Do you care about these buildings? If you do, say yes now. If you don't, then
But that's
we'll
not
start
what-
working on
yeah,
demolition.
but that's not what you're asking.
No,
What you're
that's-
asking is the pony up $120,000.
Right.
It's not a vote to ask them if they wanna do anything with the building, it's a vote to put $120,000 on you, which would add 2.5 cents to the budget.
Sure,
If
so,
we just spent 2 hours.
Exactly, that's.
Beating to death and tried to cut some more funds out of that, some tax money out. Now we're trying to add more money back in.
So I guess the principle is that if the community wants to save these buildings, there's been a lot of uproar when we demolish buildings. The state that the YMCA is in, people are screaming that it's, you know, it's their fault. Why didn't they do something 20 years ago? The Robertson paper, why didn't people do, you know, why didn't the owners do the maintenance when they could 20 years ago? So these buildings can still be saved. If we do this work, we can develop the plans, go after the grants, and over a 5 to 10 year period, they can be put into the project that you see here. These are, just for your purposes, for the January 21st. They're being introduced now. So you can look at what this project, the potential for the end use, what it does to the area behind Wheatland, but what they used to call below the hill, behind the Howard Block and behind the power company in Wheatland. The plans, there's a list here of who had input to these plans. And this isn't what the article's asking for, but it's what could be done with the buildings if we preserve them. If we decide, if the community doesn't vote to do the work to stop them from further degrading, then we would never get the support from the grantors to do the kind of work that these end-use plans have. You know, we complain when we don't do stuff to preserve buildings. We complain that why do we do studies if they don't fit on the shelf. The reason, sit on the shelf, sorry. The reason a lot of times the studies sit on the shelf is because it's a lot harder to do the work of implementing the studies than to find out what's right to do with them. So at any rate, that's why we're suggesting this article. It would hurt, it would increase the tax rate that you don't want. So if people vote for it, we know that they're willing to feel the pain, to preserve them. It's worth it to them. So it's not, same thing with the train station. The train station article, the building is in the condition where if it's let go for much longer, that will come down. It's going to be in the same position as the YMCA, as the Robertson Paper Company building. The proposal in this one is for the town to purchase and renovate it. And same thing, up to $120,000 to do that. The town would operate just a waiting room area and would sell or capital lease the area for private operators to cover the costs of operating the building. And it would keep the building preserved and in public transit for the Amtrak and Greyhound.
Who would pay to fix it?
If you look at the grant spreadsheet,
we have grants everywhere, but we don't seem to be receiving a lot of them.
so we do. The one that turned down for TLR, what they said was they gave a couple of examples and said, so here's the ones that we awarded in this cycle. They do 3 cycles a year. We encourage you to reapply. This, and the ones that we awarded this year, here's an example in Hardwick. This is the 4th time they applied for the grant. So they tell you why they didn't support it, and they ask you to do the work and come back. So the primary reason they didn't support this is the community hasn't shown that they want to preserve the buildings. So, so it makes sense that we didn't get this grant. The grants are achievable. The USDA community...
Ducking the TLR?
Yes.
So with a statement like that, how do you think folks would get behind spending their own funds to preserve the building? If the grant you wrote showed that they didn't support fixing it with grant funding?
No, they said that they didn't want to, grants often look for a match portion, right? And so to them, if they're going to invest in the long term, the millions of dollars.
Community.
So if they don't have the...
Well, can I take a stab at it? We applied for the grant, but we didn't have a local match. And the town and the village has never done anything to support those buildings. And so that's why the community development folks said no.
Yes, they said, show us the community wants to save it, show us some skin in the game, come back and apply again for the grants to do more of the work. This article is just a third of the work that we asked for, and it's just the stuff that's critical to stop the degradation, stop the water from coming in, stop the beam from falling in that's collapsing the bricks. So it's the minimum work to stabilize the building so that we can apply for the future grants, do the work to save them.
And if they vote no, then we start working on demolition,
But-
or watch it fall down.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, but here's my thoughts on that, and I love history. We can't save every building. There was an opportunity for an organization a couple of years ago, the select board had an arrangement to try and do something with that, and basically they weren't able to. We've spent almost 3 hours, a little over 3 hours here today, but roughly almost 3 hours on topic of budget. And this is, you know, we had a directive, I thought, from the board here a few weeks ago to come in. I know I mentioned level funded. Gaetano had mentioned some comments. Peter, everybody had. I'm not sure about Sue, but all the work we've just done over the course of the time frame, not just the 3 hours tonight, if this article was to be voted in the affirmative, and I don't support this article, but we're asking a few people on a Monday night, and we can stack the deck on a Monday night. I mean, I've been here long, you know that. We all, you want to push your agenda, but I mean, to spend $120,000 on this building, I think it would be better to demolish the building. I realize there's some historical significance there in the basement, but that may be something where we try to critique that area. But, you know, I've spent time not only at the recycling center, I eat local, I do some other things local. I have people stopping by my residence saying, hey, and I've heard it more this year than any year before. I'm thinking of moving from here because I can't afford to live here. And here we are, we've just gone through all this diligent work, and now we're looking to add more money to the tax rate. And you know, the railroad station's a different topic, but I don't support bringing this forward as an article.
Okay, I just would suggest that it's discussed on Monday night, but it's part of the full vote on Tuesday. Why couldn't it be on the Australian ballot? Why have just 50 people vote on it when anyone can come out and vote on Tuesday on the article?
Could we do that?
Sure. Why wouldn't you?
I'd almost say.
I'm not suggesting to have 50 people
No,
decide, that's
right.
not a show.
If we're doing that, gee, let's put the library budget on the ballot, but I think that'd be different criteria.
I agree. Half everything.
You have a comment?
No, I agree with many things Stefan just said, and although we spent 3 more hours on this thing, we didn't accomplish much, and now we have $240,000 worth of additional monies that we're asking people. I hear the same thing that Stefan does, and perhaps some folks that work in this town hall don't talk to the people we talk to, but people are tired of the spending, and I just...
And we didn't exercise.
We use terms like we can find it, like if we don't budget for something, you don't spend it. Like if you asked where $7,500 was gonna come from, did we budget for it? No, we'll get it from somewhere else, we're just.
I didn't say that, I said it.
I said that.
She
Because
said
we
that.
actually can, I mean, we have to be able to be flexible, stuff
Not in real life.
happens.
Well,
Yeah, this is real life.
if I
It's
may,
not, it's other people's money.
it is
One at a
a
time, folks.
And we found,
People on this board's money.
and we have found lots of savings for you.
but I mean,
Well, so I'm a taxpayer too,
you know,
and I hear from a lot of people that we
I
can't afford.
to save the TLR building, me as a taxpayer.
So
then
what
you
I'm
go
saying is
I'm
that
sorry.
it's not about the short-term 2 cents this year, it's about the, in 5 years, the $1,375,000 that goes onto the grand list by saving them. It's
Who would you sell that building to?
reversing that increase.
who's gonna
Who's
pay
gonna buy
those
that
taxes
building?
on that?
The end use plan, the end users.
Which will be who?
Comparable taxes around here, I don't.
I think, when I mentioned earlier, different ideas and out of the box, it's a favorite term, but, when I look at Robertson Paper Mill, I had relatives that worked there. But regardless, we spent money because the governor had to have a tent, or whatever it was criteria. But I thought, gee, instead of spending that money, I would have went out and probably, if I was spending my own money and that was my property, I would have put a gazebo there that would be somewhat permanent to the point where if the organization that now has it sold it, but I'd have that gazebo there, and I think we could have outdoor live concerts, community gatherings, and other public events. Otherwise, now it sits there as a vacant lot.
The town did not pay anything towards that tent or any of that.
Well, gee, it showed up in the warrants here when I was looking at it. There was something in there for the amount of almost.
Because it went on the town's credit card because we had to secure it that way, but BFADC pays for that, pays the town for it.
Okay.
Every penny of the cost in that thing comes from BFADC.
But would you not agree that might be a better use for that vacant lot as it is right now? To have something there that maybe the whole community could partake of, whether it been a Christmas concert or a live outdoor concert in the fall, or summer.
No, because we're trying to build a facility there that will add $1.25 million to the grant.
So we couldn't, in the interim, yank that gazebo out of there in the event someone came here to build a facility there?
We have places we have the scenic riverfront park and trail system, which is a beautiful spot for a gazebo and has concert areas by the poet's seat. We have areas like that.
And you'd want to have that outdoor event
This is
down near our septic plant or our treatment plant.
That's a beautiful trail. You don't smell the treatment plant there.
Okay.
We're getting off the point here.
Anyway, I'm not trying to be, sorry, it's a privately owned property, it's insurance issues, having it used for stuff, it's a whole separate question that I didn't come prepared to talk about, my apologies for that.
The only comment I can make is that of the two projects, I would probably lean more towards a train station development versus TLR. But there again, why would the town want to become a landlord? We are a landlord, and as long as you know as well as I do, once you're a landlord, you're always a landlord. And everybody says, well, we could sell it. Well, I would find that difficult to believe unless it's completely renovated to the town of maybe $750,000. And, the state owned it at one point. They turned it over to Green Mountain Royal and everything else, and Green Mountain let it degrade to the point it is now. I think we should start by going back to Vermont AOT and the Railroad Division and say, you guys got this thing into a hole, why don't you cough up some bucks to get it where it belongs?
Peter, I agree with that, but you know what, I'm gonna blame a previous select board, because I sat here at one point when we had $1 million in intermodal funds, and we ended up putting it into a damn parking lot up there at a bus terminal, up in Rockingham, when the focal point should have been down here. And that was just my opinion.
Quintana?
Yeah, I don't know, same thing, why don't they fix it up, the folks that own it now, why don't
They don't want to.
They don't want to own it,
Well,
they
don't have
just
any-
assume
So
that it's all
has
down.
anyone shown interest in buying it and fixing it right now? Probably not, so why would we wanna buy it and hopefully sell it to someone?
Because-
Lose the grand list.
But if I may, we followed both boards, and Deb, I know wants to comment, so I won't steal your steam, but it worked on ordinances and a plan to deal with buildings, to prevent what's gonna happen or would happen here if nothing happens from our initiative. So, I mean, and I'll I'll yield to you.
I get recognized.
Mr. Chairman, would
Okay, so my comment is, this building is currently owned by somebody who has money. Just like what happened with the YMCA building before it got dumped in the Gulf. Now is the time, if indeed the building is in that kind of shape, that is being, vaguely talked about, that it be inspected and that owner be made to make the corrections, as opposed to us, to the town, taking it on for the taxpayer, taking on the burden of fixing up a building that should be fixed by its current owner for its current use of operation. So that's something that belongs to the health officer or the zoning officer or the unsafe building issue in the village, on the village side. If indeed that's the kind of things that need to get done that are that unsafe, in that case, we have mechanisms to take care of that without us putting $120,000 into it. And that's my take on it. Take care of it before it changes hands.
Well, and then we have, from the village and the town standpoint, the building that's at the end of Tapgood Street, it's been what, going on maybe 6 years now, or 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, the house with the tree. That's supposedly, yeah, exactly, that's another subject for the unsafe building.
Yeah, well, these things are, well, we're gonna bring them back to you at the next meeting. We just wanted you to get a heads up in this meeting.
I saw Shannon come back with a number. Do you want to
Sure.
go over that quickly and then we can
Well,
move
thank you
on?
for your input, makes sense.
Here, so you're gonna have it.
I mean, I hate to knock this good work, but you know what? Now I'd like to know what it would be if we did say put these articles on and how much this would add to it back again. I mean, Gaetano's right. You gotta stop the spending.
These are different from the budget.
No, I realize that.
3 hours of work didn't change.
Well, anyway, we can talk about it next time. All right, so you wanna talk about access permit? I think Everett's here, but I don't know if he needs to be here. Or he might be in the office. Access permit
I
academy.
think that's one more comment before Gary leaves. I was kind of tuned out when we were talking about the bicycle thing. I think from the beginning have seen great potential in that area. I think we have a prime spot, and I've referenced Burke Mountain, what they've done because of outdoor bicycling.
Yep.
That's it. Look at their grand list. Look at what it did to that place, and we have that here. The river as well. I think that's when I see about looking at ways to realistically. I support that. So I just hope it works out.
Okay, let's go to
It
the
brings
access.
people here. That's how you generate revenue.
Let's do the access permit. Loveland Academy Avenue.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
All right, this is a pretty simple, easy one. 11th Academy Avenue in Saxon River. There is no current access out there at all. It's pretty surprising all these years. Good sized building, you'll see by the picture there. So I looked at it, they're proposing, you can see on the sketch, to install it to the right and below a walkway. So I've got no issues with it. They're gonna have to rebuild the walkway down a little bit because it's quite an incline right there. So they're gonna taper back and forth each way. A little bit toward Main Street, that's gonna be, has to happen anyway, and then it'll be kind of a taper, it'll be like a tip down, like you see on a lot of sidewalks. You see the sidewalk and they'll tip down, so they'll have to do that. We'll work with them to get the right slope. But I've got conditions all built in there. I don't see any issues. Other than the fact that we don't want it done this time of year.
All right, there's a sample motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the application from Matt Torney for the access permit at 11 Academy Ave in Saxon River with the conditions as detailed by staff and authorize the chair of the select board to sign the permit.
Seconded.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the application for access permit on Loveland Academy Avenue. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
We voice voting.
Sue, I don't think is on the phone. I think we can dispense with that.
All right, and Chuck's still here.
Still late?
I got a lot of work done. Appreciated the extra time.
Good man, it's time management.
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
5, appointments, DRB.
You have a memo, it's a one-page memo in front of you. I'm gonna add some clarifying comments to this. So first off, I'm just gonna cover the content of the memo. There are reappointments of Kath Martin and Thaddeus Guile, who have both been energetic members of our Development Review Board. I do have copies of their letters, if you're interested in it, but essentially they want to continue their service with the DRB. Those two appointments, we've staggered the appointments over the last couple of years. I was here last year at the same time looking for DRB appointments. We do them over the winter when there's a lull in the application, the number of applications, so we don't lose somebody's position right when we need it the most. So there are two members. I will, and up with Peter and Wendy's assistance, I will talk about a few other things. One, we were here, like I said, on January last year and sought appointments for Pat Moya, Vinnie Cherico. That's on the agenda. Peter has notes to the effect. I have notes to the effect that was done. We don't have it in the minutes. So I would ask for this board to reaffirm the appointment of Pat Moya for the DRB position. It's there. It's just a superabundance of caution that I would look to. I saw it. We couldn't find it in the minutes, but there was a lot of transfer at that point, staff coming in and going, so the minutes quality was just temporarily low at that point. So that would be my third request. The other thing is any gap in time that we had during the month of December. We talked about it as a board, and we're just going to reaffirm our own decisions in December if there was, because with Kath Martin and Thad, technically their tenure ended 6 days before our meeting. So if you looked at the letter of the law, they acted as board members without an active appointment. Now that's a few days. I don't see a pile of judges and lawyers coming after us. Nevertheless, the DRB decided as a group, we're going to reaffirm that decision we made in December, given the fact there's a technicality here. So we'll cover that. So for this board tonight, I'm asking for the motion on the reappointment of Kath Martin, the motion for the reappointment of Thad Guile, and a reaffirmation on our chair, Pat Moya's position, just to cover us.
Question, would we be better off if we went back and corrected the minutes of 2019?
I'm not sure
January?
the process to correct things that
I
you've
don't
already
think
approved.
that long ago, that's what
I
I'm
mean,
asking.
I think what we should do is, if you do go ahead and affirm it, I think we should add something to the record for those minutes and just have a note that's dated now, saying, on this date, the board recognized that this happened, or affirmed that happened. Because it's on the video, right? Isn't that how you?
There is that recourse that we could go find the archived video, watch the video, mark it down. That's some work for us. The thought that reaffirming it tonight is just as quick.
Works for me. I think we do it, if we reaffirm, then make sure it gets into the minutes.
Yes.
That was omitted from the January 2nd, 2019 minutes. And this is an action to correct that omission.
Yes, but as a separate document.
Right.
Yes.
January
Okay.
2nd minutes.
Yeah, you want a second,
Yeah.
or you make the motion?
Yep, I'll go ahead and make the motion. I'll make the motion that the Rockingham Select Board reaffirm the appointment of Pat Moya
Moya.
to the DRB Board, reference to the decision that was made on January 2nd, 2019.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I move that the Rockingham Select Board appoint Kath Martin to serve on the Development Review Board and fill a 3-year term starting January 1st, 2020 and ending December 30th, 2023.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor would vote aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I move the Rockingham Select Board appoint Thad Guile to serve on the Development Review Board and fill a 3-year term starting January 1st, 2020 and ending December 30th, 2023.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to appoint that Guile. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor would say aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
The only other discussion item is, heads up, I will be here probably in a month or two to seek an appointment for a new Development Review Board member to fill the vacancy at the passing of Vinnie Cherico. So we are soliciting members, some of them have chosen to attend meetings just to see what they would be getting into, and I'll be ready in the next month or two with an appointment request. That, as well as in the summer, I'll be approaching you all for appointment of planning commissioners, usually there's 2 of them. Are staggered.
Are we gonna get letters of intent that they wanna be on that?
Yes.
So,
For the record, for the file, we always ask for letters.
no, just courtesy, that's all.
That's right.
Okay, town constable for discussion.
Right, so we have currently no town constable, and actually, or we no active town constable, I should say. We provided some information to you about just the laws on constables, the last time we appointed them. It does need to be a town resident, and if you want someone with police powers, and logical place to look is Bellas Falls Police Department. There are just 2 who live in the town. One of them may be interested. I'm not sure yet, so I don't want to say, but, and you're not ready to appoint now anyway, this is just for discussion. So we may have someone, from the department who would be interested in being a constable. The purpose of them, or the main thing that they do now is serve papers. And they're generally less expensive than the sheriff. So the attorneys are interested in having this position filled so that they have lower costs essentially.
Okay. Any questions?
Didn't we have what's the second one?
The first and a second.
Deputy?
Yeah, first and second constable, I think.
No? We currently don't have a deputy?
Shane was the deputy, but he resigned a while ago, actually.
Actually, somewhere around January.
Oh, when he had his new job, then he couldn't have police powers.
He had a conflict because he's a state investigator, so he couldn't serve on both. So that's why we lost that one.
What, is the constable coming back? All it says is he's on leave. What does that mean?
Right. The earliest he would come back would be January 20th, except probably now it would be February. So it would be good to have another constable. It's good to have 2.
Okay, well, when we get an applicant or an interested person, you'll let us know, I'll take it up from there.
Yeah, and put it on the next agenda.
Okay. In your packet for FYI, there is a application in there for the Bellas Falls Garage Building requirements, just for you guys to look at, just to know what's going on there.
And this will be on the next meeting
Right.
also. I noticed that they're proposing to put $8.2 million into that building, the garage building.
And this in no way really obligates the town for any funds.
No, what it does obligate us to do is administration.
Right.
And we've already actually had to do it for this.
And do they get compensated, does it get compensated for that?
It depends. I don't know. I can't tell you.
Nothing interesting to find out. Okay. Agenda items for the next meeting, January 21st. We know what's going to be on there anyway.
Right, well, so that VCDP grant funding that you just looked at. Hopefully the finance and maintenance agreement for the Depot Street Bridge, the attorney has that, so hopefully he'll be done looking at it. The refinancing of the fire trucks agreement, budget, obviously. Several appointments planning commission and energy subcommittee appointments. Hopefully safety officers for the nuisance ordinance, because we need them to do the enforcement. Not DRB, possibly one DRB appointment, and then possibly constable. And the lease of the ag land, which shouldn't be, I mean, it's a lot of things, but there, many of them, except the budget, are pretty, but should be.
In light of the information on the budget, we did chop off 0.75%. We're down to 212 versus 284, so. And we have the opportunity to take another 2.5 cents off next week.
Oh, well, yeah, that was
2
2 more
weeks.
weeks.
Right.
And if you wanna do another meeting, you could.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
what do
it
we-
could-
the next budget meeting, I mean, what is there, we've gone over that thing tooth and nail, we often ask the same questions.
Onward.
We're going through the same, so what do we need to focus on?
we need to focus on that position, but
Okay.
we're keeping it up.
So then I don't know if
Keep it on
we need to have a budget discussion, because we've gone through that thing
Right.
10
As
times.
opposed to going every page. Is that
Oh,
what
yeah,
you're saying?
We're
Yeah.
questioning
I don't
every
think we
item
need
that
to
we've
go-
questioned several times before.
Right.
That's fine with me. Well, what we wanna do is look at the debt, the long term. Too, that was gonna be the primary thing for next time.
And just if we could get a clear update on what is going to be coming essentially out of our budget and put on an article. 'Cause
Yeah.
I would like to use that as addition to the increase in the budget. Just by shifting it to a different place. In my opinion, doesn't lower taxes.
Right.
No, and I wish I had known that last year with the fire trucks. I mean, that
Well,
was
the
ridiculous.
other thing is you just don't put an article out there, you just take it off the budget and just leave it out.
Yeah, that's.
Then you don't have, then it's out of the budget.
Yeah.
But if you put it on as an article, they roll it back in, you're not getting anywhere, you go right back where you started from.
Right, and that's what happened with the fire trucks.
Well, fire truck almost, I don't know, if I had my brother, it probably would have been written that it would have depended on the
Grant.
acceptance of the grant, yeah, we got the grant, but
Yeah,
it didn't, and so we're where we are.
or bonding.
But they did vote for it, so as Sue said at one point, they voted for it, they're willing to bite the bullet on it. Those that didn't vote, well, they complained, maybe it'd be better if we put it on, Australian ballot, put it on the ballot and vote down there.
Well, I don't know.
Discuss-
It did say, depending on the grant.
No, it didn't,
It did.
it didn't.
Yes,
It,
did.
it had two things, it said, if you
I
get the
read
grant,
it.
it's this, and if
But
you don't
also,
get the grant, it's
I
that.
read it, and I remember, and it was clear that, and Chief McGinnis Stevens stood up and said that in the town meeting.
Yeah, but what it said was, if we get the grant, it's this amount, if we don't get the grant, it's
But
that.
he's saying it wasn't written on.
No, he's saying he wanted it to be dependent on the grant, that if
Dependent.
you don't
In
get
other
the
words,
grant,
if
then you
didn't
don't
get the
fund
grant, you
it.
don't buy the truck,
Oh.
Yeah,
okay?
Well, sure.
But I'm just
Could have been
saying,
written differently, but I kind of feel like
well,
that's one thing that people need, or
well,
fire trucks. so-
okay, so, but there again, there was 2.5 cents on the budget, which is now reduced, but again, they voted for it, so they bit the bullet, so. But the other three, the $54,000, that's another penny. If we wanted to take that off and just take it right out of the budget, then we don't put it on an article. Those three items that are in there. Good job. All right, review and approve orders, bills, and warrants. Need a motion.
Motion to approve orders, bills, and warrants.
Wait a second. Second. Motion's made, and seconded. Discussion, questions? It's in the back.
I know it is.
Okay.
I don't want to be, what was it last time? Micromanaging. Like questioning the spending. I don't, no, I do, but
Okay,
what's,
motion's been made and seconded to approve the orders, bills, and warrants. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those bills, nay. Motion carries. Other business. Stefan.
No, sir, not at this time.
Gatan.
none.
Ben,
Nope.
do you know where we stand? Did they have they sold that duck up there yet? I understand there's just rumors around that they haven't. Do we know?
I just heard when they got that high price on it.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
what
know if
heard.
it
I
went
didn't know
through
if
or
that's
not.
consummated or not.
You were looking like you knew stuff, huh?
Yeah, I asked a question approximately 2 weeks ago, and I was told that they received the payment from Auctions International, I believe.
Yeah, I believe that it's sold, but I
Sale of
can't
ducks.
say that
Can we
100%.
find out? Just curiosity.
I saw it on Facebook.
Well, I
That
saw
it's
some
sold?
pictures of it loading onto a semi, and evidently it went somewhere.
It's going somewhere.
Interesting.
Okay. We need an executive session tonight?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Taking a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So, all those in favor?